Chapter 127. Is she dead? The Earl of Avon put away his staff and asked with a sigh of relief. The second son of the house of St. Prospero was also a mage. However, Anna's face was still serious. She felt that the giant hand holding her waist did not show any signs of loosening. Just as she was about to tell her brother to be careful, the black wings on the giant's back suddenly spread out. The complicated and mysterious blood patterns on his body suddenly emitted a scarlet light, as if some ancient spell formation had been activated at this moment. Ah! Anna screamed in pain because Colin's giant hand did not loosen but tightened instead. Gotcha! Anna found that more than half of her ribs were broken. Wait, please wait. The Earl of Avon saw that the situation was not good and quickly shouted, "We are the direct descendants of the house of St. Prospero. Sir, you don't want to be stained with the blood of the Holy Knight family members, do you?" Gotcha! Anna screamed again as a few more of her ribs were broken. Obviously, the name of the house of St. Prospero was useless. Don't. The Earl of Avon clasped his hands. "We really don't mean to be enemies with you. What will it take for you to let my sister go? Please tell us." Colin stopped squeezing and used his other hand to pull out the short sword from his head while asking, "What can you give me?" The Earl of Avon saw that Leyland pulled out the short sword from his head as if nothing had happened and cursed him in his heart. However, he said with incomparable sincerity, "How about I tell you a secret in exchange for my sister's life? Tell me. You should be a powerful druid, right?" Colin did not answer. The Earl of Avon smiled and continued, "I know where the legendary sacred item of the druids, the wild heart, is. I wonder if this secret is enough to exchange for my sister's life?" Druid? Colin was stunned. He didn't expect to be mistaken for a druid in his transformed state. Druid was an exclusive profession of the elves, but it had already died out 10,000 years ago. Even the elves who had retreated to the Radiant Moon Forest no longer had any inheritors of this profession. Legend had it that druids could imitate the forms of various animals and obtain some of the animals' characteristics and powers. Therefore, the pair of bat wings on Colin's back made the other party mistake him for a druid. Colin suddenly felt that there was nothing wrong with this misunderstanding. It was better than treating him as a monster or a devil. Therefore, Colin pretended to be eager and asked, "Then tell me, where is Wild Heart?" The Earl of Avon coughed softly and said, "It's in the arcane city, Yevil." Colin blinked and shook his head. "How do I know that you are not lying to me?" The Earl of Avon seemed to have a well-thought-out plan. He pointed at Vera, who was still hiding in the garden, and said loudly, "You are Miss Vera. I am St. Prospero Evan. Do you still remember me?" Colin raised his eyebrows. This Evan could recognize Vera at a glance. However, he quickly realized that this guy was also a mage. He must have seen Vera in Yevil before. "Hello, Earl of Avon. Of course, I remember you." Vera walked out timidly. Colin's huge and unusual body made her a little scared. "Ha, it is really you. I didn't expect Miss Vera to still be alive. Ha, the situation in Silvermoon City is getting more and more interesting." "Ah!" Anna's scream interrupted the Earl of Avon. No. The Earl of Avon did not dare to delay any longer. He quickly asked Vera, "Miss Vera, you should have heard of the Wild Heart in Yevil Tower, right? It is the treasure of the chairman of the Mage Council." Vera nodded. "See, I did not lie to you. Can you let my sister go now?" Colin shook his head. To be honest, this news was not useful to him at all. "You want to exchange this news for your sister? It is not the real Wild Heart." When did the lives of the direct descendants of the house of St. Prospero become so worthless? When he heard Colin's words, the Earl of Avon nodded in agreement. "When did the house of St. Prospero become so cheap? What else do you need? Just tell me." Colin looked at the other party's forthright appearance. He suddenly had the desire to rip off a dog-rich person. "Do you have money?" "Money?" The Earl of Avon was stunned. Apparently, he did not expect that the other party would ask for money directly. He reached into his pocket and said helplessly, "I did not bring much money with me this time. I guess I only have a few hundred gold coins." Colin was ready to agree. In fact, he did not really intend to kill the woman of the House of St. Prospero because it would completely anger the eastern region. The House of St. Prospero might even use this as an excuse to send troops to Silver Moon City. This would bring great changes to Colin's plan to control the half-elf kingdom. It was not a wise move to create more problems at this time. No. Unexpectedly, the Earl of Avon shook his head and said with a righteous face, "A few hundred gold coins is not worthy of the identity of the House of St. Prospero." Colin. Anna just wanted to punch her unreliable brother to death. "How about this? I'll add this staff to the ransom for my sister. What do you think?" Colin looked at the huge purple magic crystal embedded at the top of the staff and asked curiously, "How much is this staff worth?" "Probably 100,000 gold coins." Colin's eyes widened. This was the first time he had seen such a prodigal dog. "Okay, it's settled." "Good." The Earl of Avon immediately threw the staff to Colin, as if he was not afraid that he would go back on his word. Seeing the other party's attitude, Colin didn't want to go back on his word, so he released Anna. "Get out of Silver Moon City immediately. If I see the two of you in the city again, I'll twist your heads off." "Okay. We'll leave now." The Earl of Avon helped his sister up and pulled Omar, who was paralyzed by the wall, and hurriedly left. After they left, Colin flapped his bat wings and instantly rose into the sky. His speed was extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye he disappeared into the dark night sky. "Miss Vera, let's go quickly." "Okay." Vera nodded, but she was a little puzzled. "Why did that strange man help us?" "I don't know." Queen Aisha shook her head and lied. In fact, she had already perceived Colin's identity through the mysterious connection that originated from the depths of her bloodline, but she did not tell Vera. "So, where are we going now?" "To the Miller family." "The Miller family?" Vera hesitated. Queen Aisha smiled and explained, "You are now a life-saving straw for the Miller family. As long as you are alive and well, the Miller family will not have to bear the crime of killing you. So, they are now the people in Silver Moon City who do not want you to be hurt the most." Vera was relieved, but when she thought of Colin who had arranged everything, she could not help but ask, "What about Colin? Where is he now?" "Viscount Angeli will join you soon," Lucien said. "That's good." Chapter 128. At the north gate of the palace, 3 figures hurriedly walked out. "All right, let's take a break." "You two are too heavy, I can't help you." The Earl of Avon leaned his sister and Omar against the wall, then he laid down and let out a long sigh. "Why did you take the initiative to give the staff to that weirdo?" Anna could not help but blame her brother. Such a precious staff, even for the House of St. Prospero, was not something that could be casually discarded. A sly smile appeared on the Earl of Avon's face. "That guy is obviously short of money, so after getting my staff, he will definitely find a merchant to exchange it for gold coins. In this way, there will definitely be clues left behind. We can follow the clues to find out which force this guy belongs to. If he is not careful enough, we can even directly find out his true identity." Anna came to a sudden realization. After a while, she asked again, "Do you really think he is a druid?" "Isn't he?" "I think he is more like a knight." "A knight?" The Earl of Avon sat up straight with a look of disbelief. "Are you sure?" Anna shook her head. "I'm not too sure. However, the energy emitted from his body is indeed holy light, although it has a bloody smell. But it should be holy light without a doubt." "Sir Earl, I also think that person is a knight." Omar, who was on the side, also interjected. The Earl of Avon really believed it this time. After all, the 2 knights who had fought with the other party believed that the other party was a knight, so it could not be wrong. A knight? If he is also a druid, then he can only be a half-elf to be able to have both professions. Then is he at the 5th step? The Earl of Avon knew that Anna and Omar were both at the 4th step, but they were beaten up so violently by the other party, so he guessed that the other party should be at the 5th step. Unexpectedly, Anna shook her head again. "No. I have fought with the 5th step. I fought with a 5th step knight before, and this guy's strength shouldn't have reached the 5th step yet." "Then why were you beaten up so badly?" Anna rolled her eyes and said helplessly, That guy's holy light energy isn't very strong, but it's very strange. It's as if it has some kind of indistinct control over the blood in my body. There were a few times when he disrupted the flow of my blood and chi, and I almost lost my breath. Moreover, this fellow's strength was extremely terrifying. He didn't look like a human at all. Instead, he looked like some kind of giant beast. Also, do you remember my last 2 strikes? I was pretty sure I was in his head. Maybe you put it in a crooked position? After all, his head was shrouded in a bloody mist. That's impossible, Anna said firmly. All right. Let's not talk about this anymore. Let's hurry and leave Silver Moon City. If we get caught by that guy again, we'll be in big trouble. Then, our mission, Earl of Avon rolled his eyes and said, My silly sister, you're still thinking about the quest? Our mission is definitely hopeless. But, isn't Vera still alive? Doesn't that mean that we still have hope? Vera is still alive, which means that the other party's methods are much better than I thought. Earl of Avon shook his head and sighed. Unfortunately, I was too careless during the last meeting with the king. That's why I was directly locked up by the damn House of Medea. Otherwise, I could still have played with this opponent. But now, the situation in Silver Moon City has been settled, and we are completely hopeless. Let's go, silly sister. The silver moon was high in the sky. Colin watched from afar as Vera and the other 2 were happily welcomed into the manor by the Miller family. Only then did he feel relieved and leave. Vera should be safe now. If the Miller family wanted to get rid of the misfortune of being exterminated, they had to protect Vera. In addition, Queen Aisha and the blood slave Cynthia were taking care of her, so there shouldn't be any more problems. As for Colin, he still needed to arrange a perfect ending for this coup. Whoosh, whoosh, flapping his huge bat wings, Colin soon returned to the sky above the half-elven palace. At this time, the area around the inner court of the palace had completely turned into a hell on earth. Countless half-elves were as humble as ants, and they could disappear at any time in this political whirlpool. Blood and corpses had become a cruel scene in the palace, and the thick smell of blood filled the air, almost suffocating everyone. Witnessing all this, Colin could only feel the blood in his body getting colder and colder. It's time to end this farce. Colin muttered to himself, then flapped his bat wings and rushed down to the main hall of the inner court of the palace. What is that? A guard heard the sound of the wind above his head, and he looked up in surprise, then saw Colin's figure quickly passing by. Just as he was about to warn his superior, the figure had already turned into a black lightning, fell from the sky, and rushed into the main hall of the palace in an instant. Only then did the guards in front of the hall react. They never thought that the enemy would use such an unbelievable method to rush in. When they hurriedly rushed into the hall to protect the king, they found that the terrifying Batwing giant was already standing in front of the old king. Prince William held his knight sword and stood behind Colin, his voice trembling. What do you want to do? Colin looked at the old king who was standing straight in front of him, and suddenly laughed. Your Majesty, I didn't expect your body to be so strong. The old king faced this strange person who suddenly rushed in, and did not panic. Instead, he calmly mocked himself. It's just a small trick, and I wanted to lure out the ambitious schemer as soon as possible. But I didn't expect. Don't worry, Your Majesty, I've already helped you take care of the rebel leader. Look, is this him? Colin held up Sith's bloody head in front of the old king. The old king was not afraid, and he stared at the head carefully, then smiled and nodded. That's right, it's the rat from the Savoy family. After hiding for so long, it's finally quiet. After that, he looked at Colin with a sincere face and said, Brave warrior, thank you for giving the Modwin family such a great gift. How can I repay you? Colin nodded. Yes, I do need a gift in return. Just say it. As long as the House of Medea has it, we will definitely not be stingy. Of course you have it. Colin laughed a little arrogantly. I want your head. What? The old king was shocked, and thought that he had misheard. But Colin did not give him any time to react. His right hand shot out like lightning, and pressed on the old king's head. Asterisk crack. Asterisk another bottle cap was unscrewed. Father! Your Majesty! The hall was suddenly in chaos. Prince William and the half-elf guards rushed towards Colin like crazy. But Colin spread out his large bat wings and flapped them forcefully. Asterisk boom. Asterisk violent air currents rushed through the hall, and Colin crashed through the roof and flew into the air. A silver moon outlined Colin's figure, and his large wings made him look like an angel who had descended to earth. But his voice was like that of a demon who would destroy the world. Your king is already dead, run for your lives. Under the shocked gazes of the half-elf, 2 heads fell from the sky. Chapter 129. Asterisk thud. Thud. Asterisk the 2 heads that fell from the sky caused the fierce battlefield below to fall silent. Then the identities of the 2 heads were also recognized. It's the king. It's Sith. The death of the king and the rebel leader caused panic to spread uncontrollably. Whether it was the Silver Moon Guard or the rebel army, they all began to think of one question. Since their boss is dead, what are we fighting for? At this time, if there were people of suitable status and reputation from both sides to stand out, they could stop the soldiers from panicking. But unfortunately, even Prince William and the Duke of Lute were staring blankly at the 2 heads on the ground. They fell into endless panic and shock, and had no time to care about their subordinates who were gradually becoming restless. No one knew who was the first to throw down their weapons, but it was like the first domino that fell. Under the chain reaction, the soldiers from both sides who had been fighting fiercely for half the night threw down their weapons one after another and began to flee in all directions. Seeing this, Colin flapped his wings and flew towards the south gate of Silver Moon City. He did not forget that he still had an army of his family there. After hearing about the killing in the city, the Knight of Rigo would probably lead his army to attack. As for the Knights of Telda and the House of St. Hilda's guards who were acting as bait, Colin did not have time to care about them for the time being. After all, he still knew how to differentiate between close and distant. Under the flapping of his large bat wings, Colin's speed was extremely fast. Not long after, he saw the flames caused by the fierce battle in the south of the city. That should be the Knight of Rigo and his men. Just as Colin was about to dive down to help, he suddenly felt a weakness that came from the depths of his blood. Could it be that there was a time limit to the transformation? Colin was shocked and hurriedly rushed towards the nearest ground. He was afraid that he would lose his wings halfway and turn into a pancake when he landed. The Knight of Rigo, who was still fighting bravely, suddenly heard a loud boom. It was as if the ground had trembled. The Knight of Rigo, who did not know what was going on, hurriedly looked around vigilantly. Then he saw a few half-elf girls screaming as they ran out of a small wooden house by the side. The Knight of Rigo had obviously misunderstood their disheveled appearance. The Knight of Rigo, who had a strong sense of justice, immediately strode forward, ready to teach this scum who had taken advantage of the chaos in the city to harm innocent women. Bang! The Knight of Rigo kicked the door open and shouted, "Boy! Get the hell out of here!" His words were stuck in his throat before he could finish his sentence. This was because the Knight of Rigo recognized the shirtless man who was frantically wrapping a bedsheet around himself. It was Colin. Their eyes met. The air suddenly quieted down. Lord Viscounts. Cough cough, please continue. Colin looked at the Knight of Rigo's timid appearance and was speechless. It's not what you think. Forget it, let's not talk about it. Find me some clothes. Yes. After Colin had finished dressing, the Knight of Rigo hesitated for a moment, but still felt that he had to make up for the misunderstanding from before. He touched his big bald head and smiled foolishly. My lord, it's actually the half-elf commoner's honor to be chosen by you as your lover. You don't have to climb the roof, just tell me and I'll help you. Shut up. Colin glared fiercely at the Knight of Rigo, feeling that he would not be able to explain this topic clearly. However, he still felt that he had to explain, I was fighting with someone just now, and my clothes were all ruined. Then I fell into this house, I see. The Knight of Rigo had a look of realization on his face, but he did not know whether to believe it or not. Colin shook his head and could only change the topic stiffly. How are the casualties among your men? Not many. Although the half-elf guards have a lot of people, their fighting power is not that great. Colin nodded. All right, then gather the troops and follow me. Yes. When the first rays of the morning sun shone on the top of Silver Moon City, the beautiful garden city had already lost its former glory. This sudden rebellion had caused the whole city to fall into chaos, and it was as if Pandora's box had been opened, releasing the dark side that had been hidden in some people's hearts for a long time. Theft, rape, arson, murder. Countless crimes had taken place one after another last night. In addition to the rebels who had escaped from the palace, the whole of Silver Moon City had turned into a living hell in the blink of an eye. Of course, this hell was only for the half-elf commoners. The half-elf nobles who had their own private armed forces and strong castles were naturally not affected much. For example, the Miller family. "Colin, it's great that you're okay." At the entrance of the Miller family's manor, Vera jumped into Colin's arms with a look of surprise, completely ignoring the gazes of the people around them. Of course, the people around them did not dare to show any strange looks, and they all turned their heads and pretended not to see anything. "What can happen to me?" Colin hugged the girl's soft body and smelled the fragrance at the tip of his nose. He suddenly felt that all the trouble he had been through for so long was not in vain. After the joy of reunion gradually faded, Vera shyly left Colin's arms and turned around to look for the Knights of Telda. She was puzzled and asked, "Where are the Knights of Telda?" "He got separated during the battle. I have already sent someone to look for them. Don't worry." Of course, Colin would not tell Vera that he had used the Knights of Telda as bait. Vera trusted Colin. Colin looked past Vera and looked at Queen Aisha. "Your Highness Queen Consort, Silver Moon City is in chaos now. His Majesty the King has been killed during the chaos. Therefore, I need you to rush back to the palace immediately to take charge of the situation." "His Majesty has passed away?" When they heard the news that the old king had died, everyone exclaimed with different expressions on their faces. Queen Aisha also had a shocked and sad expression on her face. However, Colin, who knew the other party well, could see the joy in her eyes. "Yes, Your Highness Viscounts. I will return to the palace now. I wonder if you and Miss Vera can come with me? The half-elf kingdom needs the support of both of you now." Vera naturally looked at Colin and asked for his opinion. Colin pretended to be reserved and nodded. "Of course, we are willing to lend a helping hand in times of crisis because of the friendship between the half-elf kingdom and the northern frontier for so many years." After that, Colin turned around and ordered the Knight of Rigo, "Open a path and escort Queen Consort and Miss Vera into the palace." "Yes, Your Highness." The Knight of Rigo replied loudly. After a night of fierce fighting, the half-elf Silver Moon Guard had already been destroyed and the Angeli family's army had become an important military force in Silver Moon City. Soon, Colin and the others entered the palace smoothly. At this time, the palace was no longer as solemn as it used to be. Bloody corpses could be seen everywhere. When Colin walked into the main hall, he saw Prince William kneeling in front of the old king's corpse. He did not even react when Colin and the others walked in. When Queen Aisha saw this, she stepped forward and whispered, "William, Miss Vera and Viscount Angley are here." Prince William slowly turned his head and looked at the entrance of the hall. However, his eyes were still unfocused. Miss Vera, Viscount Angley. Even the news that Vera had come back from the dead did not make him as shocked as he should have been. This loyal and honest half-elf prince did not have his own opinions. After his father's death, it was as if he had lost his soul. He was muddle-headed and did not know what to do. Colin stepped forward and said, "Your Highness Prince William, this rebellion has caused Miss Vera to have serious doubts about the House of Media's ability to control Silver Moon City and continue to lead the half-elf kingdom. Therefore, after consulting all the half-elf nobles, Miss Vera has decided that the House of Media is no longer suitable to continue to lead the half-elf royal family. Therefore, the throne will be inherited by Aisha Miller. Do you have any objections?" Prince William's body trembled, and his unfocused eyes finally regained focus. He looked up at Vera and then looked at Queen Aisha. Finally, he turned his head and looked at Colin. Colin's face was as cold as water and his eyes were as cold as ice. Prince William did not know why, but he suddenly felt as if he had returned to the nightmarish night yesterday. When the demon descended from the sky and twisted his father's head off, therefore, The half-elf prince finally crawled on the ground and trembled. "I have no objections." Chapter 130. This coup d'état came and ended very quickly. It was like a summer storm. If one was not careful, the world would be washed and changed. Most of the half-elf civilians had no opinion on the House of Media's initiative to give up the power of the royal family and let Queen Aisha inherit the throne and become Aisha's queen. The political struggles of the nobles had always had nothing to do with them. Moreover, for the half-elves who worshipped beautiful things, the beautiful Queen Aisha was much more pleasing to the eye than the old King Medouin. If there was a poll in the half-elf kingdom at this time, then the support of Queen Aisha would undoubtedly crush the support of the House of Media. For the half-elf nobles, although this coup d'état had a great impact on them, no one dared to stand up and question Queen Aisha at this time. In their view, Vera's attitude was the same as the attitude of the Duke of St. Hilda. Since the Dukes of the North thought that the Miller family was more suitable to become the half-elf royal family, then what could they do? If the messenger of the eastern region stood up and questioned, perhaps some political opportunists would want to follow behind and shout a few times. But now, the messenger of the eastern region had disappeared, so the half-elf nobles naturally did not dare to say anything. However, although Aisha had inherited the half-elf throne, the coronation ceremony could not be carried out for a while. This was because only the royal family of the Empire of Light, the San Lorenzo family, was qualified to crown Queen Aisha. Queen Aisha had already sent a messenger to Imperial Dragon City. If there were no accidents, the San Lorenzo family would soon send a messenger to crown Queen Aisha. In the main hall of the palace, Colin sat casually on the throne as if he was the real king. Meanwhile, Queen Elsa was reporting to Colin respectfully, "That's right. The Silver Moon Guard has been basically eliminated. The officers of the House of Media have been demoted and transferred and replaced with people from the Miller family." However, the Silver Moon Guard suffered heavy losses this time. After regrouping, there were less than 20,000 men left. "I plan to issue a conscription order after a while. Since the House of Media took the initiative to give up its position, it saved us a lot of trouble. Therefore, I intend to bestow the title of Duke to William Media. This way, I can appease the people and show my benevolence." However, the Lute family who participated in the rebellion did not deserve this mercy. They would be stripped of all their lands and titles, and the Duke of Lute would be sentenced to death by hanging. The Hyacinth Chamber of Commerce had been forced to close down, and the Savoy family members had been expelled from the half-elf kingdom. In addition, the assets of the Lute family and the Hyacinth Chamber of Commerce are all listed here, as well as the assets of the gnome's treasury. Please take a look. Colin's interest was immediately piqued. He quickly took it and flipped through it. "This is just a rough estimate. I'm afraid we'll have to wait a few days for a more accurate estimate." "Good." Colin looked at the numbers that made him dizzy at the end of the document. He was so excited that he almost forgot himself. He knew that the half-elf kingdom was rich, but he did not expect it to be to this extent. He suddenly felt that he did not need to worry about the expenses of the cavalry army of his dreams anymore. With the money tree that was the half-elf kingdom, perhaps even if his territory in the northern frontier did not expand, he would still be able to raise an army of tens of thousands of cavalry. Therefore, what Colin needed to do now was to hold this money tree firmly in his hands. He could not let anyone touch it, not even the Duke of St. Hilda. "Oh right, the Black Cavalry should be entering the country soon. Send someone to welcome him." "Yes." Before Colin left, he had told his butler, Eamon, that he would send a letter back every 5 days. If he did not receive a letter after 3 days, Eamon was to immediately inform Marquis Garcia. When Vera faked her death, the House of Media had sealed off Silver Moon City, thinking that this would cut off Colin's contact with the outside world. However, they did not know that even if there was no contact, it was still a kind of contact. Calculating the time now, the Black Cavalry should be arriving at the half-elf kingdom soon. When Marquis Garcia arrived at Silver Moon City, Colin felt that he had a lot of things to discuss with the other party. In particular, the Duke of St. Hilda had repeatedly forced him. This time, he even plotted to assassinate Vera. This was absolutely unacceptable. Colin believed that as long as Marquis Garcia was on his side, There was nothing to be afraid of the Duke of St. Hilda. "Oh, by the way, can you help me deal with this staff and exchange it for gold coins?" Colin handed the Earl of Avon's staff to Queen Aisha. After instructing Queen Aisha to stabilize the situation in the half-elf kingdom, Colin walked out of the palace. He walked all the way to the royal garden. The place had not been completely cleaned up yet. There were still broken branches and leaves everywhere, as well as broken petals all over the ground. But even so, Colin still felt that this place was very pleasing to the eye. This was because Vera was in the garden. At this time, Vera was sitting on the swing in the middle of the garden. The bright morning light shone on her body through the gaps between the leaves, forming a mottled light shadow. The morning dew had not completely disappeared yet, and Vera's gorgeous face was faintly discernible in the faint mist. A few spotted butterflies were floating up and down around her body, but she was frowning. It seemed like she was deeply immersed in a melancholic mood and had no time to care about anything else. "What are you thinking about?" Colin walked over and reached out his hand to gently stroke Vera's eyebrows. It seemed as though he wanted to help her to ease her worries. Vera did not avoid Colin's intimate actions. She did not want Colin to worry about her. Therefore, she forced a smile and said, "Actually, it's nothing much. I was just thinking about something that someone said to me in this garden that night. It's the leader of the rebel army. His name is Sith. I heard that he is a descendant of the former half-elf royal Savoy family." "What did he say to you?" Colin already knew what Vera was worried about, but he still pretended not to know. After all, Vera did not know that Colin was also present that night. Vera's beautiful brows furrowed again. "He said that he was ordered by Father to assassinate me. Then what do you think?" Colin asked slowly. "Do you believe in your father or the enemy?" Vera tilted her head as if she had finally realized something. "Of course, I believe in my father." The girl's mood immediately brightened up again. "I am so stupid. How could I be so confused about such a simple question for so long? Sith must have lied to me on purpose. Colin, help me push the swing." Colin smiled and helped Vera to push the swing. Looking at the girl's innocent smile, he suddenly dismissed the idea of telling her the truth. It was not only because he did not want these dirty things to tarnish the beauty in front of him. It was also because he suddenly realized that if he wanted to tell Vera everything, he would have to tell her about the complicated feud between the Duke of St. Hilda and Marquis Garcia. In this way, he would have to tell Vera the identity of her real father. However, this was forbidden by Marquis Garcia. Therefore, Colin planned to wait for Marquis Garcia to arrive at Silvermoon City before he could decide whether he wanted to confess everything to Vera. Colin, come and sit on the swing too." But, of course, Colin wouldn't refuse such an invitation. With a leap, he nimbly squeezed onto the swing and sat side by side with Vera. The familiar fragrance rushed into his nose and went straight to the bottom of his heart. Chapter 131. The rustling autumn wind swept up the fallen leaves. There were very few people on the streets of Silvermoon City. After a tragic coup d'état, the half-elf capital was still under military control. The slave market in the west of the city was not as busy as before. The Hyacinth Merchant Guild had already been surrounded by fully armed half-elf guards, who were constantly moving out all sorts of things. In a dark alley 1,000 meters away from the Chamber of Commerce, Ross Savoy sneakily poked his head out and carefully observed the situation of his family's Chamber of Commerce. Obviously, the situation was not good. Ever since his brother Sith's head fell from the sky and landed in the palace, Ross knew that the Savoy family's operation had failed again. However, he did not despair too much because Queen Aisha did not kill the Savoy family. She only banished them. The half-elf nobles had a tradition of forgiving the losers. Moreover, not only did the Millet family not hate the Savoy family, they even had to thank them. If it weren't for the Millet family's coup d'état, the half-elf throne wouldn't have fallen into their hands. However, although the Savoy family was saved, their assets were all confiscated. Ross sighed and reluctantly looked at the Hyacinth Chamber of Commerce one last time before turning to leave. However, when he turned his head, he saw a man in a black robe standing quietly in the shadows behind him, coldly looking at him. Mr. Chong, Why have you come to Silver Moon City? Mr. Cheng's lips curled into a mocking sneer. What? Can I come? Of course you can. However, as you can see, our family has just met with a disaster, so we can't entertain you. Mr. Chong ignored Ross's politeness and directly asked, Do you know why you failed? Ross shook his head and respectfully asked, Please enlighten me. Because you were too greedy. Mr. Chong's tone was cold. Moreover, you did not follow my instructions. A trace of anger appeared on Ross's face, as if all the anger and fear that had accumulated over the past few days had suddenly exploded. Do as you say? Mr. Chong, you were not in Silver Moon City at that time. How would you know what we were facing? The development of the situation was beyond everyone's expectations. My brother and I could only adapt according to the situation. Improvise? Mr. Chong chuckled. This is the first time I've heard someone describe betrayal in this way. Betrayal? Roth seemed to have thrown caution to the wind and roared furiously, Do you really think that the Savoy family is still a dog raised by your family? Wake up. It was no longer 300 years ago. You've become a stray dog and can only rely on the support of the trolls to survive. You expect us to be loyal? You can talk about loyalty to the Savoy family when you dare to come out into the open without that damned hood. In the face of Roth's harsh sarcasm, Mr. Roth didn't get angry. Instead, he sighed and said unhurriedly, Yeah, it's been more than 300 years. The world has almost forgotten about my family. The once loyal servants have also begun to find other ways to survive, forgetting their past vows. After pausing for a moment, Mr. Chong suddenly laughed. However, I never expected your loyalty from the start. After the lesson at the northern frontier, I've already understood that vows are laughable. Loyalty is just a bubble under the sun. It looks dazzling, but it's actually fragile. Mr. Chong took a few steps forward, his smile growing brighter. But I think that the most laughable thing is still you people. You think that you're very smart. You don't want to be a chess piece, but you also want to be a chess player. But in fact, you can't even see the chess game clearly. You don't even know where the real chess eye is. Mr. Chang's words made Roth confused. He didn't understand what he meant. However, Mr. Chang didn't seem to expect him to understand. It was as if he was just saying it to himself. In your eyes, you only see Silver Moon City and the half-elf throne. But how can these unimportant things be qualified to become the real focus of this game? Roth more or less understood this time, but the feeling of being belittled made him even angrier. He couldn't help but mock again. Silver Moon City's situation has already been decided. What can you do? The situation has already been decided? Mr. Chang chuckled and shook his head. I haven't used my killer move yet. Moreover, didn't I tell you that Silver Moon City is just an unimportant corner of the chessboard? It can't decide the outcome of this game. Then what's your killer move? Roth was getting more and more annoyed with Mr. Chang, who was pretending to be mysterious. My killer move? Mr. E was halfway through his sentence when his voice suddenly turned soft, and his words became unclear. Roth didn't hear it clearly. He took 2 steps forward curiously. Just as he was about to ask, he realized that he couldn't speak. He felt as if there was a piece of burning charcoal in his throat. It was so hot that he was about to spit fire. In the next second, he really did spit fire. Then, the fire quickly ignited his face, his head, his neck, and spread to his entire body. In the end, Roth struggled in pain and turned into a pile of ashes. You don't have the right to know my killer move. Mr. Chang laughed coldly. His gaze passed through the dark alleyway and looked in the direction of the northern frontier. Northern frontier, Fallen Eagle City. The fat merchant, Oliver, was sweating profusely as he welcomed a woman in luxurious clothes into the Tulip Merchant Association. Madam Penny, we can't go on like this. If we don't sell those grains, although we can make a lot of money from the increase in grain prices, but I'm afraid we won't live long enough to earn that money. Penny's wine-red eyes stared coldly at Oliver. She asked in return, What are you afraid of? Don't worry, with me here, the Earl won't arrest you for hoarding grains. Oliver believed her words. After all, she was Earl Oman's most beloved lover. Naturally, she had the confidence to deal with the Earl. However, Oliver still said anxiously, "Madam, I'm not worried about the Earl." "Then what are you worried about?" "I'm worried about those slaves and commoners who are going crazy from hunger. Did you know that during the invasion of the trolls this spring, a large number of fields missed the spring plowing? Now, famine has begun to spread in the northern frontier. If we don't sell our grain now, I'm afraid people will starve to death. It's just a group of slaves and commoners. If they die, so be it." Penny looked unmoved, as if she was no longer on the same level as him. "Madam, have you ever been hungry?" Oliver began to become impatient. He no longer hid some things. "I have been hungry. Moreover, I know that feeling. It's worse than death. It can turn people into lunatics, into beasts, into terrifying creatures that devour everything." Penny looked coldly at Oliver and said with a smile, "Continue." Oliver hesitated for a moment, but did not dare to continue. "Isn't it just a rebellion?" Penny said in a relaxed tone. "Since you know, then why? Take care of yourself, Mr. Oliver. You won't starve." Penny gently patted Olaf's chubby face and said, "Don't worry. But if you do something you shouldn't do, then it's not necessarily the case." Chapter 132. At the end of October, the winter dungeon could feel the approaching winter. The bone-chilling rain fell for 3 days and turned into snowflakes on the 4th day. On the 5th day, when the long-absent sun finally broke free from the dark clouds, chilly Winter Castle had become a world of snow and ice that was covered in silver. But the residents of Winter weren't in the mood to appreciate the beautiful scenery. Most of them were running out of food. Is there no sign of food prices falling? In the study in the courtyard of the Lion's Roar Castle, the Duke of St. Hilda asked as he added firewood to the fireplace. Behind the Duke was a middle-aged man with an amiable temperament. He had a pair of sea-blue eyes that were filled with waves of wisdom. His white ponytail was carefully combed and blown to the back of his head. His clothes were exquisite but not extravagant. An ancient handwritten scroll was fastened to his waist, and his left hand was wearing a white glove. The residents of the Lion's Roar Castle called him Scholar Dawn. Though the title of scholar wasn't a noble title, it was still very precious. Only those who had studied at the Empire's White Tower Academy and graduated were qualified to use the title of scholar. The number of graduates from the White Tower Academy could be counted with one hand. Therefore, every scholar was the best candidate for a court official, and they were naturally the targets of the dungeon lords. Scholar Dawn shook his head. His expression was full of worry. In the past 3 months, the price of food in the northern frontier has increased by more than 20 times. It's definitely not just because of the poor harvest caused by the trolls' invasion. Someone is deliberately hoarding food and manipulating the price. They're just merchants who are willing to sacrifice their lives for money. The Duke of St. Hilda was full of disdain. Issue a duke's order to the dungeon lords of the northern frontier to control the merchants in their territories. If the price of food is still high in half a month, don't blame me for killing them. Yes? Scholar Dawn nodded. Is there enough food for the Golden Lion Legion? If there's no large-scale war, there's still enough. Scholar Dawn hesitated for a while before reminding him. However, Your Grace, I still suggest that you purchase another batch of rations, just in case. Hearing this, the Duke of St. Hilda frowned. He clearly understood what Master Dawn was worried about. Famine was the easiest factor to trigger a rebellion. Thus, the Duke of St. Hilda immediately nodded and said, "Then let's purchase another batch." "All right. However, the price of food in the Empire is rather high right now, so I'm afraid. No matter how high the price is, buy it for me." The Duke of St. Hilda threw a few more logs into the fireplace. Looking at the dancing flames, he suddenly asked, "Where is the Black Cavalry now?" Scholar Dwayne carefully looked at the Duke of St. Hilda's face, but he couldn't see any obvious emotions on his face. The latest news came yesterday. Black Cavalry has left the northern frontier and entered the half-elf kingdom. Yes? The Duke of St. Hilda nodded, but he didn't give any instructions. The raging flames were reflected in the Duke's deep eyes, as if revealing his restless heart. Seeing this, Scholar Dawn was about to leave when he suddenly heard a majestic voice from outside the castle. "Duke of St. Hilda, Otto Vulcan, the northern prince of the Troll Empire, hereby challenges you to a duel in the name of revenge for his majesty Murdoch. Asterisk boom. Asterisk a blazing flame suddenly exploded in the fireplace. The Duke of St. Hilda suddenly stood up and looked out of the window. A troll warrior emitting a terrifying aura was standing at the highest point of the Lion's Roar Castle, looking down at the guards who were constantly gathering below. Seeing the Duke of St. Hilda about to leave, Scholar Dawn hurriedly stepped forward to dissuade him. Your Grace, it is said that Prince Otto has just advanced to the Sanctuary Realm. So what? The Duke of St. Hilda didn't have the slightest intention of backing down. Am I supposed to hide in the Lion's Roar Castle and let him strut around outside? After saying this, the Duke no longer cared about the stunned Scholar Dawn and strode out. The southwest border of the half-elf kingdom. The Black Cavalry was camping here. After Marquis Garcia finished drinking the meat soup, he casually wiped his mouth and asked Marquis Dawson, who was beside him, we should be passing through the Shadow Canyon in another 30 miles, right? Yes, Your Grace. Marquis Dawson's attitude was still as respectful as ever. Even though he had been conferred the title of Marquis and had pledged his loyalty to the Duke of St. Hilda, he still didn't dare to offend the Duke of St. Hilda. However, when Marquis Garcia gathered the Black Cavalry and marched into the half-elf kingdom, this former chief butler of the Black Cavalry also came to help without hesitation. Send someone to investigate carefully. Marquis Garcia ordered. Marquis Dawson smiled and said in a slightly disapproving tone, Your Grace, this is the half-elf kingdom. What danger can there be? It's always right to be cautious. Okay, I'll arrange it. Seeing Marquis Garcia insist, Marquis Dawson promptly nodded in agreement. After the rest, the army set out once again. Marquis Garcia urged his horse forward in the Shadow Canyon, but there was a trace of worry between his brows. Dawson, have you sent someone to investigate this canyon? Your Grace, please rest assured. I've already sent someone to investigate thoroughly. This place is very safe. Marquis Garcia nodded and continued forward. But the more he went forward, the more Marquis Garcia felt that something was wrong. That kind of feeling of trepidation shrouded him, as if something bad was about to happen. Stop. Finally, Marquis Garcia ordered. Your Grace, what's wrong? We're only halfway there. Marquis Dawson hurriedly asked. It's too quiet here. Marquis Garcia's gaze was cold, as if he had realized something. The next moment, he decisively ordered, turn around. The rear army becomes the front army, and the front army becomes the rear army. Withdraw from the Shadow Canyon. Your Grace. Marquis Dawson had a puzzled expression. Your Grace. Marquis Garcia ignored him and insisted that the military officer immediately go forward to give the order. Just as the Black Cavalry began to change their formation, a loud sound suddenly came from the canyon. Rumble. Marquis Garcia suddenly turned his head and saw a dazzling flash suddenly erupt from the two cliffs behind him. The terrifying arcane energy was like the might of the heavens, blowing apart the two cliffs in the middle of the canyon. Countless shattered boulders rolled down, smashing towards the waist of the Black Cavalry. Bang! Bang! Miserable cries and hoarse neighs resounded through the canyon. Marquis Garcia's face instantly became incomparably pale. While he was in a daze, he suddenly felt a sharp pain coming from his waist. Turning his head, Marquis Garcia saw that the subordinate he had trusted the most had stabbed a dagger into his waist. Farron Dawson. You traitor! Facing the furious gaze of Marquis Garcia, Marquis Dawson took a step back and smiled calmly. My apologies, Your Grace. Previously, when my subordinates were investigating this canyon, they weren't too careful. Chapter 133. Why? Marquis Garcia looked at Marquis Dawson, who was restrained by the angry Black Cavalry officers, and asked with a gloomy expression. Marquis Dawson smiled and calmly said, I'm sorry, Lord Marquis. You have shown me great kindness and I don't want to betray you. However, in order to let the dwarves fulfill their long-cherished wish of establishing a nation, I have to do this. Establishing a nation for the dwarves? Marquis Garcia's eyes flashed with a trace of understanding. Then he pointed at the pure white Pegasus flag that had suddenly risen above the canyon and asked, Is this the promise the House of St. Prospero gave you? Marquis Dawson shook his head. No. In fact, I didn't know that the ambush in Shadowy Canyon was actually the army of the eastern border. Then who encouraged you to do this? Marquis Dawson smiled somewhat playfully. Lord Marquis, why don't you suspect the Duke of St. Hilda? After all, he is the lord I am loyal to. Marquis Garcia remained unmoved. No one knows my brother better than I do. He wouldn't be so stupid. But the Black Cavalry is now the biggest unstable factor in the northern frontier. Don't you suspect that your brother wants to take this opportunity to eradicate the threat of the Black Cavalry? Marquis Garcia had an extremely complicated expression on his face. He sighed and said, "You don't understand." Marquis Dawson frowned and then shook his head. "It's fine if you don't want to say it. However, I can't reveal the name of the person who gave me the promise." Marquis Garcia sneered, "You think I can't guess if you don't say it?" The once colorful tiger has now become a dog that only dares to hide in the shadows. You actually believe in the promise of a family that can even betray their own race? What a joke. Marquis Dawson's expression changed. He seemed to be deeply hurt by Marquis Garcia's words. Then he became angry out of humiliation and roared, "So what? If I don't believe them, should I continue to believe in your house of St. Hilda? We dwarves have served you for over 1,000 years, but have you ever looked us in the eye? Perhaps the establishment of the dwarves' nation is just a joke in your eyes, but it is the highest mission that our ancestors have fought for." Marquis Garcia hesitated for a moment. There were some things that he did not say. He waved his hand dispiritedly and ordered, "Let him go." The angry officers were naturally incomparably shocked. "Let him go." Marquis Garcia emphasized again. Marquis Dawson clearly hadn't expected the other party to let him off so easily. Marquis Garcia's cold once again sounded, "Dawson, today, if I kill you, perhaps you will become the hero of the dwarven race. Therefore I let Dawson live. Dawson's son Dawson. At the same time, I want to see with my own eyes what kind of joke your so-called dream of establishing a country for the dwarves is. Get lost." Marquis Dawson's face turned green and red. Finally, under the contemptuous eyes of the Black Cavalry, he staggered away. At this time, the shouts of the Eastern soldiers were constantly coming from the top of the canyon. Naturally, the content was to ask the Black Cavalry to immediately put down their weapons and surrender. The current situation of the Black Cavalry was indeed extremely bad. The narrow terrain of the Shadow Canyon made the cavalry squeeze together, making it impossible for them to organize a charge. Moreover, the falling boulders had cut the Black Cavalry's formation in half. Except for a small part of the troops that fell behind, most of the soldiers were blocked by the layers of boulders. If they were to move forward, there was no doubt that the Eastern Army had set up layers of obstacles in the front of the canyon, waiting for the Black Cavalry to rush through and break their heads. In the face of such a desperate situation, Marquis Garcia still remained calm. He then waved his hand to summon a high-ranking military officer and ordered in a low voice, "Knight Roger, go back immediately, climb over the boulders blocking the way, gather the troops behind and lead them back the way they came, rush out of this canyon. What about you?" "I can't go." Marquis Garcia pressed the wound on his waist. Although it had been simply bandaged, black blood was still oozing out. "Marquis, I will escort you out." Marquis Garcia glared at Knight Roger and said in a firm tone, "I will not abandon the Black Cavalry. But you must go. It doesn't matter if I die, but the Black Cavalry must leave behind a spark." Knight Roger still wanted to say something, but Marquis Garcia didn't give him a chance and roared in a low voice, "Shut up. Listen to me. After you withdraw with the rear army, don't get entangled with the Eastern Army, and don't go back to the northern frontier. Go north around the Shadow Mountain Range, and spend some time to reach Silver Moon City. When you get there, find Viscount Angley and ask him a question. Should the Lord of the Northern Frontier be surnamed St. Hilda? If he says yes, then you will be loyal to him. Otherwise, you will kill him, return to Coldwinter City, and be loyal to the Duke of St. Hilda. Do you understand?" Knight Roger quickly nodded. He seemed to want to say something else, but he was stopped by Marquis Garcia's fierce gaze. "Hurry up and go." Knight Roger had no choice but to kneel on one knee and solemnly bow to Marquis Garcia before leaving with red eyes. Marquis Garcia waited until Knight Roger was far away before gathering his officers and asked, "Is there anyone who wants to surrender?" "We will never surrender," everyone shouted without hesitation. Good. A smile appeared on Marquis Garcia's face. "There are only black cavalry who die in battle. There are no black cavalry who surrender. Pass down my order, dismount, advance, and kill." Woo! In the harsh sound of the bugle, the battle suddenly broke out. As the most elite army of the northern frontier, and even the entire Radiant Empire, the Black Cavalry did not lack the courage to fight with their lives on the line. Even if at this time they had lost their biggest advantage, but the fighting spirit that broke out in the desperate situation was still impressive. Under the leadership of a group of officers, the Black Cavalry soldiers all abandoned their horses and rushed to the mouth of the valley on foot. They climbed over the layers of obstacles set up by the Eastern Army, shouted the name of the Radiant Lord, and launched an attack on the enemy. Release the arrows. The arrows suddenly became the main character in the air, like a dark cloud shuttling back and forth. However, such a rain of arrows could not scare off the Black Cavalry. They were like locusts rushing out of the narrow mouth of the valley, rushing to the Eastern Army's position. Blood flowed freely, and corpses were scattered all over the ground. The battle at the mouth of the valley became extremely tragic from the beginning. The corpses of the Black Cavalry soldiers quickly piled up at the mouth of the valley, forming a terrifying hill. The strong smell of blood drifted in the air, suffocating people. The Eastern Army, who originally thought that victory was in their hands, began to feel a chill in their hearts and shivered. It was as if those who rushed over without fear of death were not human, but a group of crazy beasts. Chapter 134. Silvermoon City, Half-Elven Palace. In a dark and gloomy basement, Colin was biting the neck of a half-elf, sucking on it continuously. This half-elf was a ranger from the Lute family, sentenced to death by hanging because of his participation in the coup d'état. However, on the day of the execution he was secretly swapped. The one who was hanged was another prisoner with a similar figure and appearance. As for him, he was brought to the basement of the palace and became Colin's test subject. Colin wanted to know, other than the human race's divine profession, knights, could other races' divine professions be turned into blood descendants as well? However, even after Colin bit the ranger from the Lute family for a long time, the embrace ceremony he was looking forward to did not happen. It seemed that the elf race's divine profession, rangers, could not be turned into blood descendants. Sighing, Colin pulled out his canine teeth. Not long after, the ranger from the Lute family stood up again, his eyes dull. Just like Cynthia, he had also become Colin's blood slave. A level 3 ranger blood slave. Not bad. Colin stroked his chin, comforting himself. Taking out a monkey mask and putting it on the ranger, Colin smiled and said, "Yes, from now on, your code name will be Monkey." The monkey ranger's eyes flashed, as if he understood what Colin meant. Letting the monkey ranger continue to accompany the fox knight, Cynthia in the basement, Colin walked up the stairs. This basement led directly to the king's study. No, it should be called the queen's study now. Ever since the death of the old king, Queen Aisha seemed to have changed into a different person. The lingering melancholy from before had quietly faded away, replaced by a blossoming charm. It was obvious that she had dressed up meticulously today. She was wearing a red low-cut dress with thin shoulder straps, showing off her slender and curvaceous figure. A light blush, bright lip gloss, and an embroidered gold accessory stuck to her forehead made Aisha's beautiful face appear even more three-dimensional. Sparkling diamond-studded earrings dangled from her slender ears, setting off the queen's refined and noble aura. Seeing Colin walk out of the basement, Queen Aisha smiled, instantly brightening the entire study. "Lord Viscounts, are you done with your work?" Queen Aisha did not ask what Colin had been busy with down below. She was a woman who knew her limits. Colin walked to the window and saw a group of priests gathered in the square outside the hall, asking curiously, what are they doing?" Queen Elsa walked to Colin's side and stood next to him. She explained, "This is the tradition of the half-elf royal family. After every king dies, they will invite the priests of the Church of Light and the priests of the Church of Fate to pray for their souls. Colin was a bit obsessed. What kind of traditions? The priests and priests were praying for the old king. Would his soul return to the embrace of the god of light? Or God. However, he did not say much. After all, he had to respect the traditional culture of other countries. Seeing Colin's silence, Queen Aisha explained, "You said that we have to treat the House of Media well, so I let them arrange this ceremony. You did the right thing." Colin nodded. "After all, your throne was given to you by the House of Media. You have to show them enough benevolence and gratitude to win their hearts." "All right. According to the plan, I will confer the title of Duke to William Medowin at the conferring ceremony tomorrow. However, there are still many members of the House of Media in the palace as courtiers. Should we take back some of these positions?" "No need. That will make you seem too petty." Colin looked back at Queen Aisha and said, "Moreover, it is not a good thing to let the Miller family dominate. The House of Media can be a good counterbalance." "I understand." Queen Aisha nodded. Even if Colin spoke frankly about the fear and wariness of the Miller family, who had become the new half-elven royal family, she did not have any objections. Colin looked at Queen Elsa's calm face and explained, "The result of a single family's dominance is corruption and depravity. Believe me, the Miller family can only prosper for a long time with a rival spurring them on." "I understand. Just like the northern frontier, because of the trolls, the army of the north is the strongest in the empire. Without an opponent, the eastern region can only rely on the natural moat of the New Shui River to block the enemy's advance." Hearing this, Colin laughed. "The raging river? I am afraid that it will not be able to protect the east for long." "Of course, the Crystal River in the half-elven kingdom can be requisitioned at any time if the northern frontier needs it." Colin shook his head and said, "There is no hurry. If the Duke of St. Hilda really wants the Crystal River, he will have to ask me and Marquis Garcia's opinion." Queen Aisha smiled and suggested, "You can take the opportunity to ask the Duke of St. Hilda to marry Miss Vera again. I think this time he will not refuse you." Colin nodded his head in agreement, obviously thinking the same thing. At this moment, he still didn't know that the outside world had long since undergone a drastic change, and the sea had turned into mulberry fields. "Oh, by the way, you can also start to think about the issue of the heir." Colin was still helping Queen Aisha to plan. "You can choose a suitable candidate from the Miller family to be your adopted son." Queen Aisha did not immediately agree this time. A faint blush suddenly appeared on her flawless face as she softly said, "Compared to an adopted son, I would rather have a biological son." Colin raised his eyebrows and looked at Queen Aisha in surprise. Queen Aisha also stared into Colin's eyes, and at the same time, her soft and delicate body slowly leaned towards him. Colin's heart skipped a few beats when he felt the ecstasy of her touch on his arm and the fragrance lingering at the tip of his nose. However, he still maintained a trace of calmness and dissuaded her, "You have to understand that it is impossible for me to marry you." "Of course, I know." Queen Aisha's face was flushed, and her breathing gradually became rapid. "Vera is the most suitable marriage partner for you. However, I can be your lover. Everyone says that half-elves are the best lovers. Don't you want to verify the truth of this sentence?" Colin stared at the Queen's hazy eyes and persuaded her again, "You have to think clearly. The child born like this can only be an illegitimate child. I have already thought about it. We can announce to the public that the child is the posthumous child of the old king." When he heard this, Colin's eyes lit up, and then he no longer suppressed the impulse in his heart, and he hugged the slender waist of the half-elven queen in front of him tightly. Queen Aisha could not help but let out a cry of surprise, and her whole body went soft, and then she leaned on Colin's broad chest as if she had lost all her strength. A strange feeling that she had never felt before made her heart pound like a little deer. Colin could clearly feel Queen Aisha's gentle and soft skin and mature and plump body through the thin dress. Will this child's surname be Morduin? Of course not, his surname will be Miller, and he will also be the next half-elven king. Vaguely, the prayers of the priests and priests could be heard outside the window. May the Lord have mercy on this respected king and let his soul rest in peace. Chapter 135. On a small path in the forest, A small team of about 50 people was slowly moving south. It was close to noon when the team stopped by a small stream to set up camp. "Brother, wake up. It's time for lunch." Anna shook the Earl of Avon a few times, but found that he still didn't move. She raised her eyebrows, clenched her fist, and punched the Earl of Avon's lower abdomen heavily. The poor Earl of Avon vomited from this seemingly casual punch. After a while, the Earl of Avon panted and turned to look at his violent sister. "Why are you throwing such a tantrum so early in the morning?" "Early? It's already noon." The Earl of Avon waved his hand weakly. "What's the difference? It's time for lunch. Do you want to eat?" "Sit." The Earl of Avon struggled to get up. He knew that if he didn't eat now, his heartless sister would starve him until night fell. After all, they were members of the House of St. Prospero. Even if they were in the wilderness, lunch was sumptuous, but the atmosphere was a little stagnant. After returning from Silver Moon City with no results, everyone's mood had been low. Of course, the Earl of Avon was an exception. He was still as carefree as ever, only caring about drinking all day long. Just as everyone finished lunch and was about to set off again, the scout who had gone out to scout the surroundings suddenly turned back. And he brought back an extra person. "My lord, this is the messenger of the Sky Horse Army." The Sky Horse Army was the direct army of the House of St. Prospero, the master of the eastern region. It had always been in the hands of the Duke of St. Prospero. However, in recent years, the Duke of St. Prospero had begun to train his eldest son, Marquis Vincent. He had handed over the daily training of the Sky Horse Army to him. "Why you here?" The Earl of Avon's sleepy eyes suddenly brightened, as if he had suddenly sobered up. "My lord, Marquis Vincent is in Shadow Canyon right now. He just led the Pegasus Legion to fight the Black Cavalry of the northern frontier and won. I'm going to bring this good news back to White Dew City." "Black Cavalry? And he won?" The Earl of Avon's eyes almost widened, as if he had heard a fantasy story. "Yes, Your Excellency, we defeated the Black Cavalry. Furthermore, they even captured Marquis Garcia." The messenger's face was red with excitement as he shouted, "Really? Big Brother defeated Marquis Garcia? That's amazing!" Anna exclaimed excitedly. However, the Earl of Avon frowned instead. Although he and his big brother were not on good terms, it was not to the point of jealousy at this time. He was only keenly aware that something was wrong. The Earl of Avon was very clear about how capable his big brother was. He could actually defeat Marquis Garcia, who had outstanding military achievements. Why did this sound like a huge lie? Where is the Pegasus Legion station now? In Shadow Canyon? Let's go and take a look. The sky above Shadow Canyon was still shrouded in thick smoke. The stone walls on both sides of the canyon were also scorched. Crows and vultures flew in flocks above the canyon and fell into the canyon, fighting with the wild beasts in the mountains for the corpses that littered the ground. At a glance, the scene was exceptionally terrifying. When the Earl of Avon and the rest arrived, the smell of blood almost suffocated them. It was only now that the Earl of Avon finally believed that his big brother might have really defeated the Black Cavalry. "Evan, Anna, hi, you're here. It's been a long journey." As soon as they met, Marquis Vincent greeted his younger brother and sister with a glowing face. As the first successor of the St. Pros clan, he was now in high and vigorous spirits. After defeating Marquis Garcia's Black Cavalry, Marquis Vincent felt that he had become one of the top generals of the empire. "Big brother, congratulations. Father will be proud of you when he knows." Anna sincerely congratulated her brother. However, the Earl of Avon was different. He first gave a perfunctory congratulation, then immediately raised his doubts. "Big brother, how did you lure Marquis Garcia into Shadow Canyon? You don't have to worry about that. Anyway, the Black Cavalry was almost completely annihilated in this battle. Even Marquis Garcia was captured by me. What else do you have to say about such a battle record?" The Earl of Avon obviously had something to say. He growled angrily. "To be able to lure Marquis Garcia into such a dangerous place, it's obvious that there's a problem within the Black Cavalry. Even if you don't say this, I can guess it. However, since you already had such a plan, why didn't you tell me in advance?" I could have cooperated with you in Silver Moon City to perfect this plan even better. I could have even used this opportunity to— Enough. Marquis Vincent forcefully interrupted his brother. You've accomplished nothing in Silver Moon City, and you're blaming me? Haven't you always boasted of your unparalleled wisdom? Why do you still need my help? The Earl of Avon sighed inwardly. He understood that the reason his brother didn't tell him about the plan was that he was afraid of him and didn't want him to share the credit. However, this fear not only chilled the Earl of Avon's heart, but it also made him angry. In the face of the threat of an external enemy, the House of St. Prospero actually couldn't work together. Instead, they were plotting against each other. Taking a deep breath, the Earl of Avon forcefully suppressed his anger. His tone gradually became cold. Then, my good brother, may I ask how many troops you've brought with you this time? 200,000 troops? What about now? How many are left? Marquis Vincent was slightly stunned, but then he pretended to be tough and said, about 100,000. How many are there exactly? The Earl of Avon continued to ask. Along the way, he'd already seen the wounded soldiers in the camp, and the atmosphere was depressing. This didn't look like an army that had just won a great victory. Marquis Vincent's gaze was somewhat evasive. The specific casualty count hasn't been completed yet. Why are you asking about this? How can there be no casualties in a war? Especially the annihilation of a strong army like the Black Cavalry on the northern frontier. How can there not be a certain price to pay? This time, the Earl of Avon was sure. His brother only won a Pyrrhic victory even though he had the advantage of time and place. What do you mean the statistics haven't been completed yet? It was estimated that more than half of the 200,000 troops were lost. With such a loss ratio, the Earl of Avon didn't know whether to lament the collapse of the Eastern Frontier Army or be shocked by the terrible destructive power of the Black Cavalry in the face of despair. But no matter what, he was sure of one thing: his brother was used as a knife. Unfortunately, Marquis Vincent was still complacent and immersed in the false halo of victory. He didn't realize this at all. The Earl of Avon suddenly felt a little tired and asked, "Where's Marquis Garcia? Can I see him? He's seriously injured and still unconscious. How about this? Evan, you and Anna are responsible for escorting him back to White Dew City and handing him over to my father. In addition, there are a lot of wounded soldiers in this battle, so you'll be responsible for leading them back to White Dew City. What about you?" The Earl of Avon suddenly had an ominous premonition. Marquis Vincent straightened his chest and put on a confident look. "I'll lead the army north to attack Silver Moon City and firmly control the half-elven kingdom in my hands." The Earl of Avon wanted to dissuade him, but when the words reached his mouth, they changed. "Okay, brother, then I'll wait for your triumphant return in White Dew City." Chapter 136. Sir Cusius, I didn't expect you to be a part of this ambush. The Earl of Avon sent off his brother and the army heading north, then turned to a middle-aged man in a white mage robe and smiled. Cusius didn't seem to want to talk about this topic, so he simply replied, "I just happened to be there." Of course, this kind of words couldn't fool the Earl of Avon, but he didn't pursue the matter. This ambush on the Black Cavalry involved many forces, and the Earl of Avon felt that he had to go back and ask his father personally to find out the truth. However, looking at the group of injured soldiers gathered around him, the Earl of Avon couldn't help but frown. At this moment, he clearly understood the terrible price his brother had paid in order to ambush the Black Cavalry. Out of the 200,000 men in the Pegasus Legion, 30,000 had died, 50,000 were injured, and 20,000 had deserted under the Black Cavalry's crazy counterattack. In other words, the Pegasus Legion had already shown signs of collapse. If the Black Cavalry hadn't shed his last drop of blood, the victory of this ambush might not have belonged to the eastern region. In addition, 18 knights had died in battle, including a 5th-grade knight. Such a terrible price in exchange for the destruction of the Black Cavalry. The Earl of Avon didn't know whether it was worth it or not. At this moment, he finally understood why his brother insisted on continuing to lead the army to the north. The ambush had taken advantage of the right time and place, but it turned out to be a Pyrrhic victory. If Marquis Vincent returned to White Dew City like this, his reputation would definitely be ruined. The Duke of St. Prospero wouldn't easily let go of his son who had caused more than half of the Pegasus Legion. The Earl of Avon suddenly felt that Marquis Vincent's trip to Silvery Moon City this time might not be smooth sailing. With a sigh, he didn't want to worry about his brother anymore, so he turned to the messenger and said, "Let's go." Half-Elven Palace. After the conferring ceremony, the banquet officially began. Colin casually dealt with the half-elf nobles who were trying to suck up to him. Then, he sent them away and went up the spiral staircase to the second floor. The cold night wind blew into the empty palace, making the silence here a sharp contrast to the bustling downstairs. Colin took a few steps forward and saw the beautiful figure leaning on the balcony. Tonight, Vera was wearing a pink rose crochet dress. The length of the dress was about 10 centimeters above her knees and it accentuated her long and slender legs. "This is the first time that I have seen you wearing stockings," Colin said as he stood behind Vera. Vera turned around and smiled at Colin before she said, "This is a gift from Queen Aisha." Because there was no such chemical material as nylon, the stockings in this world were generally made of silk and cotton. The silk stockings produced by the half-elf kingdom had always been very popular among the noble women. "Well, it suits you very well," Colin nodded as he looked at the stockings. Vera could not stand Colin's burning gaze and she shyly stretched out her hand and pulled down the hem of her dress. However, it was obviously a little futile. Colin's heart beat faster when he saw the young girl's shy posture. Colin took a few steps forward and stood side by side with Vera. He looked at the stars in the night sky and asked with a smile, "Why are you here alone? Is the banquet very boring?" "Yes, it is a little boring," Vera nodded with a melancholy expression on her face. Colin seemed to understand something and asked, "Are you homesick?" Vera turned around and looked at the man beside her. Colin's warm gaze made her gradually feel relieved and she smiled before she said, "Yes, a little. Don't worry. Marquis Garcia has already led the Black Cavalry to pick us up. You will be able to go back very soon." "Okay." Vera nodded obediently. However, Colin's next sentence almost made the young girl's heart jump out of her throat. "After we go back, I will ask the Duke to marry you." Vera didn't say anything and didn't dare to look at Colin. However, her fair face was flushed red in an instant, making her look extremely beautiful. "I heard that the person who killed the previous king that night was called the Winged Knight by everyone." Vera blushed and changed the topic stiffly. Colin was amused and he also felt that it was very interesting. "Is that so? Winged Knight? It sounds very powerful. Then, do you know why the Night Guild has the bat wings?" Vera was relieved when she saw that Colin did not continue the previous topic. However, she also felt a little lost. Maybe he is also a druid. Colin decisively told her the reason that the Earl of Avon had helped him to think of. Druid? But isn't this profession extinct a long time ago? Who knows? Maybe it is not completely extinct yet. Vera nodded thoughtfully. Then this winged knight must be a half-elf. After all, druids need the blood of elves to practice. That should be the case. Colin suddenly felt that he could ask Queen Aisha to arrange someone to deliberately lead this topic. In this way, everyone would be looking for the winged knight among the half-elves and they would not look at Colin suspiciously. He could also use the identity of the winged knight to do some things that were not convenient for him to do. At this moment, Colin suddenly heard light footsteps behind him. When he turned around, he saw Queen Elsa standing there in a splendid dress. "Viscount Angley, Miss Vera, am I disturbing the two of you?" "Of course not." "That's good. I came up to inform the two of you that the Black Cavalry is about to arrive at Silver Moon City." "Really? Uncle Garcia is about to arrive?" Vera exclaimed in surprise. "Yes, the Silver Moon Guard patrolling outside the city has encountered the Black Cavalry's outpost and sent back a signal." "Then let's go to the city gate to welcome them," Colin said as he strode out. Although it was close to midnight, the city gate of Silver Moon City was still illuminated by countless torches. Colin, Vera and Queen Aisha stood side by side at the city gate. The guards of honor behind them were also in formation. After a while, the ground began to tremble slightly. In the rumbling sound of the horses' hooves, A thin black line suddenly appeared from the darkness and continued to spread towards Silver Moon City. This familiar sense of oppression made Colin completely calm down. But not long after, he frowned. This was because he smelled a trace of the smell of blood. Moreover, as time passed, as the Black Cavalry continued to get closer to Silver Moon City, the smell of blood became stronger. Queen Aisha also realized that something was wrong. She turned to look at Colin and said, "Viscount Angley, something seems to be wrong." Colin pursed his lips and did not say anything. Vera's expression also became a little anxious. She seemed to want to say something, but when she saw Colin's solemn expression, she immediately swallowed her words. Finally, the Black Cavalry arrived at Silver Moon City and began to slow down. At this time, the people who came to welcome them finally saw the appearance of the army. Almost all of them were covered in blood. Moreover, the number was not right. The 50,000 Black Cavalry was definitely not the scale that was in front of them. An ominous premonition shrouded Colin's heart, causing him to feel cold all over. Under the shocked gazes of the people, a knight covered in blood walked out of the crowd and came to the city gate. Do-la-la. The half-elf honor guard did not know what was good for them and played the welcome song. However, Queen Aisha turned around and stopped them with a sharp look. Knight Roger came in front of Colin and the others, turned over, dismounted, took off his helmet, knelt down on one knee and said in a choked voice, "Miss Vera, Viscount Angley, the main force of the Black Cavalry has been ambushed in the Shadow Canyon. Marquis Garcia is surrounded. We do not know if he is alive or dead." Wow, this bad news suddenly made Colin feel dizzy. He could not believe his ears. Marquis Garcia was ambushed? How was this possible? And in a place like the Shadow Canyon? With Marquis Garcia's cautious fighting style, how could he rashly lead his army into the canyon, which was extremely dangerous for cavalry? Forcing himself to calm down, Colin asked, "How did you get ambushed? Why didn't you investigate in advance?" "Marquis Dawson betrayed us. He deceived Marquis Garcia and led the Black Cavalry into the enemy's trap." Fran Dawson? The image of a dwarf suddenly appeared in Colin's mind. At the same time, he could no longer suppress the thought in his mind. Could it be that Marquis Dawson was ordered by the Duke of St. Hilda to betray Marquis Garcia? If this was really the case, then the Duke of St. Hilda must have been plotting against him and Marquis Garcia from the very beginning. Using Silver Moon City as bait, he wanted to completely eliminate the Black Cavalry, an unstable factor, so that the northern frontier would no longer have any noise. "How many people do you have left now?" 8,000. 8,000. Colin had a heavy expression on his face. "Colin?" Vera also had a panicked expression on her face at this time. Colin held Vera's small hand and solemnly promised her and Knight Roger, "Don't worry, I will avenge Black Cavalry." Chapter 137. When the first ray of light shone on Silver Moon City in the early morning, Colin was still wide awake. After listening to Knight Roger's detailed description of the Black Cavalry situation, Colin was not in the mood to sleep at all. Vera, who was worried about her uncle's safety, finally fell asleep after crying for a while. Colin gently covered Vera with a blanket and then motioned for Knight Roger to follow him out. When the two of them came to the corridor outside the hall, a half-elf maid carefully approached them and asked, "Lord Viscounts, Lord Knight, would you like to have breakfast?" Colin did not have much of an appetite at the moment, but looking at Knight Roger's appearance, it seemed that he had not had a good meal for a long time. So, he nodded and said, "Send 2 sets over." Soon, the maid came over with 2 plates. "Just put them on the ground." Colin did not want to disturb Vera's sleep, so he sat down on the stairs in the corridor. Knight Roger obviously did not care about these things at this time, so he also sat down next to Colin. When the maid saw this, she had no choice but to put the plates on the stairs and then quickly left. After stuffing some food into his mouth, Colin asked again, "So, Marquis Dawson did not say who planned the ambush?" But Marquis Garcia said that it was not the Duke of St. Hilda's plan? Colin was suddenly confused again. Originally, he was convinced that this was the Duke of St. Hilda's plot from the beginning to the end, but he did not expect that Marquis Garcia would deny this possibility. So, Why did Marquis Garcia think that his brother would not plot against him? The black cavalry in his hands had long been the biggest unstable factor in the northern frontier. Colin had previously wondered why the Duke of St. Hilda would plot against the half-elf kingdom and even the eastern region when the internal threat had not been eliminated. If the half-elf kingdom was just a bait and the real target was the black cavalry, then everything would make sense. But why did Marquis Garcia believe that his brother wasn't the mastermind behind the ambush? If it wasn't the Duke of St. Hilda, then who instigated Marquis Dawson's rebellion? As if noticing Colin's confusion, Roger asked, "Sir Viscounts, do you suspect that the Duke of St. Hilda is behind this ambush?" Colin was silent for a moment before he shook his head. "Now that I think about it, it seems unlikely that this ambush was planned by the Duke of St. Hilda." "Why?" "I don't doubt that the Duke of St. Hilda can make Marquis Dawson betray Marquis Garcia. But how did he convince the Eastern Army to cooperate with him in setting up an ambush in the Shadow Canyon? You must know that the Northern Frontier's plot against the half-elf kingdom has obviously touched the Eastern Army's sensitive nerves. The House of St. Prospero has probably been secretly guarding against the Duke of St. Hilda, so why would they cooperate with his plan to eliminate the Black Cavalry? Aren't they worried that the Shadow Canyon is actually a trap set up by the Duke of St. Hilda and his brother?" After listening to Colin's analysis, Roger nodded in agreement. But then he rolled his eyes and asked in a seemingly casual tone, "But if it was really the Duke of St. Hilda who planned this ambush against the Black Cavalry, then is your promise of revenge still valid?" Colin was still thinking about who the mastermind behind the ambush could be, so he didn't pay too much attention to Roger's question. "Of course it's still valid. If the Duke of St. Hilda really did such an outrageous thing, then I will definitely seek justice for Marquis Garcia. Then will you kill the Duke for this?" Colin raised his head and looked at Roger. He suddenly realized that this was actually a good opportunity to subdue the remnants of the Black Cavalry. 8,000 Black Cavalry. They were definitely a military force that couldn't be ignored. Therefore, he answered straightforwardly, "If Marquis Garcia dies in this ambush, then I will definitely find a way to make the mastermind pay with his life, even if that person is the Duke of St. Hilda." Roger's eyes flashed as if he was excited, but also hesitant. After a moment, he asked again, "Then after the Duke of St. Hilda dies, who do you think is suitable to inherit the position of Lord of the Northern Frontier?" Colin frowned, feeling that this Roger was a little strange. Why would he care about this kind of issue? According to Marquis Garcia's judgment and Colin's reasoning, the Duke of St. Hilda had basically been cleared of suspicion. So, why would Knight Roger suddenly care about what would happen after the Duke's death? Looking at the serious expression on Knight Roger's face, Colin thought that Knight Roger was acting a little strange because he was too shocked. "I think that Miss Vera is very suitable to inherit the position of Lord of the Northern Frontier." Colin directly spoke his mind this time. Moreover, he also had the idea of testing Knight Roger. When he heard Colin's answer, Knight Roger seemed to be relieved. He smiled and said, "I think so too." Colin immediately realized that Knight Roger was also aware of the real relationship between Vera and Marquis Garcia. Otherwise, according to the rules of aristocratic succession, the third son of the Duke, Joyce, would be ranked before Vera. Therefore, Knight Roger's reaction could only mean that he also knew about Vera's true identity. And as a knight of Marquis Garcia, of course, he would be more inclined to support Vera. However, this was actually not too surprising. Marquis Garcia had asked Knight Roger to lead the rear army to break out of the encirclement. This obviously showed that Knight Roger was his trusted confidant. Therefore, it was normal for him to know about Vera's true identity. Just as Colin was about to test whether Knight Roger knew who Vera's biological mother was, the Knight of Rigo strode in and reported, "Lord Viscounts, there is news from the Shadow Canyon." "How is it?" Knight Roger could not help but ask anxiously. "The Black Cavalry in the canyon has been completely wiped out and Marquis Garcia has been captured by the Pegasus Legion." Knight Roger's eyes instantly turned red when he heard the news. The veins on his right hand that was holding the sword were bulging and the hilt of the sword was cracking. Colin sighed and comforted him, "Although this is not good news, at least it is not the worst. After all, Marquis Garcia is still alive and we still have a chance to redeem him. Knight Roger raised his head and there was a glimmer of hope in his eyes. The Knight of Rigo touched his bald head and said, "My lord, actually, there is another piece of bad news from the Shadow Canyon." "What other bad news is there?" "The Eastern Army that wiped out the Black Cavalry is currently heading towards Silver Moon City. They are expected to arrive in about 5 days. Colin's eyes widened and he quickly asked, "How many of them are there?" "About 100,000. 100,000? Colin was a little worried. However, looking at the eager Knight Roger beside him, and recalling the careful guidance that Marquis Garcia had given him back then, as well as the half-elf kingdom that he had painstakingly taken under his control, Colin took a deep breath and said firmly, "I'm sorry. What are you afraid of? Then let's fight." They actually dared to come to Silver Moon City. Isn't this an opportunity for revenge delivered to our doorstep? Good. Knight Roger responded loudly and without hesitation. He knelt on one knee and presented his sword to Colin with both hands. "Respected Viscount Angley, I am willing to pledge my loyalty to you. As long as you are willing to avenge Marquis Garcia, the 8,000 Black Cavalry will be at your disposal." Colin's eyes lit up and he immediately took Knight Roger's sword and nodded on his shoulder. "I, Colin Angelo, accept your loyalty." Chapter 138. Marquis Vincent is deeply sorry to hear that His Majesty the King has met with misfortune. However, Marquis Vincent also believes that under Your Majesty's rule, the half-elven kingdom will have a brighter future. Therefore, Marquis Vincent specially ordered me to bring a congratulatory gift to Your Majesty as a sign of respect. The Eastern messenger was a middle-aged man of about 40 years old. He had a fair complexion and a short beard. His noble attire indicated that he was a Viscount's. This Viscount's Austin put a small delicate box on the table in front of Queen Aisha, then respectfully retreated. Although his etiquette was impeccable, his condescending attitude was not concealed. However, this was the usual attitude of the imperial messengers in the half-elven kingdom. Queen Aisha was already used to it. Marquis Vincent is very considerate. Queen Aisha smiled and expressed her thanks. At the same time, she signaled the maid beside her to open the box. The maid opened the box and found a flag inside. She took it out and unfolded it. It was a military flag. The flag of the Black Cavalry. The flag was still stained with blood, and there were traces of burns on the lower left corner. Even if it was only a flag, it made Queen Aisha feel as if she could see the scene of the tragic battle in the Shadow Canyon. At the same time, anger rose from the bottom of her heart. Queen Aisha did not have much affection for the Black Cavalry, but she was thoroughly enraged by the Eastern messenger's arrogant attitude. The other side sent this flag over, clearly to say, "The army of the northern frontier has already been destroyed by us. If you know what's good for you, then hurry up and follow us to the east." Viscount Austin still had the same expression. His face had an impeccable fake smile. His eyes were neither happy nor angry as he focused on Queen Aisha. Queen Aisha's face suddenly bloomed with a brilliant smile. She had already felt the malice from the Eastern messenger from the beginning. Now, she seriously looked at the other side and praised. "I didn't expect Marquis Vincent to be so accomplished in the military at such a young age. Even the famous Black Cavalry was defeated by him. Truly a young hero." Viscount Austin smiled reservedly. "Your Majesty is too kind." The Marquis Vincent was worried that the Black Cavalry would pose a threat to Silver Moon City, so he sent troops to ambush them. I didn't expect him to win so easily. It seems that the so-called invincible Black Cavalry is only in name. The smile on Queen Elsa's face became even more radiant, as if it had some kind of breathtaking charm. Viscount Austin hurriedly lowered his head, not daring to look any longer. "On behalf of the half-elves, I would like to thank the Marquis Vincent for helping Silver Moon City remove the Black Cavalry threat." Marquis Vincent is thinking for the half-elf kingdom, and I am very grateful. When Viscount Austin heard this, the fake smile on his face finally showed a trace of sincerity. "Your Majesty, you have made the right choice for the half-elf kingdom. The other party's arrogant attitude made Queen Aisha completely lose interest in talking, so she got up and smiled. Your Excellency Viscounts must be tired from the long journey. You should rest first. I will set up a banquet for you in the evening. Thank you, Your Majesty. After Viscount Austen left, Queen Aisha dismissed the attendants in the hall. Then, Colin came out from behind the curtain. Have the people from the eastern region always been so arrogant? He sat down on the throne unceremoniously and sneered. Queen Aisha smiled charmingly and sat directly on Colin's lap. A pair of jade arms wrapped around Colin's neck and said in a half-coquettish and half-venting tone, "It can't be helped. A small kingdom like the half-elves can only bow and scrape in front of the Empire's emissary." Colin held Queen Aisha's plump body in his arms and took a deep breath. The fragrance in his nose calmed his irritable heart a little. Don't be afraid, that Vincent is just a villain who plays tricks. See how I deal with him. Okay. Queen Aisha put her face in Colin's arms, as if listening to his heartbeat. Colin stroked the Queen's smooth back and suddenly said, "By the way, the emissary from the eastern region didn't mention the Black Cavalry's remnant army, so they shouldn't know that the 8,000 Black Cavalry have already retreated to Silver Moon City." Yes, they shouldn't know yet. However, the Black Cavalry's movement in the city was so big that the half-elf nobles basically all know. This news can't be hidden from the eastern region for long. That's right. However, how to leak this news to Viscount Austen? We can do something about it. You have a good idea again? Yes, but that's not the main point now. Then what is the main point now? Queen Aisha's question had just left her mouth when she found that her mouth was blocked. The half-elf throne that bore the burden of thousands of years of power struggle was now ushering in a more primitive and fierce battle. Chapter 139. Colin, I can't attend tonight's banquet, right? Vera asked as she helped the man straighten his collar. At this time, Colin had already changed into a standard black aristocratic tuxedo. He hugged Vera and kissed her soft red lips gently. Yes, you are now a seriously injured person. Of course, you can't attend the banquet. Vera pursed her lips and seemed a little wronged, but then she wondered, but I have appeared in front of the half-elven nobles many times before. They must know that I am not seriously injured, right? Fool, sometimes lying is not to make the other party believe it. Then what else could it be? It is to give each other a tacit understanding. Vera's doubts did not reduce. Colin smiled and rubbed the girl's hair. The eastern region knows that we are lying, and we also know that the eastern region knows that we are lying, but as long as Silver Moon City is still in our hands, they can only treat our lies as the truth. Vera understood this time, but then she was a little worried. What if the eastern region army takes Silver Moon City? In that case, no matter what lies they say, it will become the truth. Colin said lightly, and then his tone became firm again. But as long as I am here, they will not be able to take Silver Moon City. Well, I believe in you. As night fell, the half-elven palace became lively again. Although they had just experienced a tragic military coup, the half-elven nobles' enthusiasm for the banquet did not diminish at all. Tonight, Queen Aisha was wearing a purple rose-patterned evening dress, revealing her smooth white back. She was very tall, and with a pair of silver high heels on her feet, she looked like a proud white swan. All the men present felt ashamed and did not dare to stand beside her. Queen Aisha, who looked gorgeous after carefully dressing up, raised her glass first and said loudly, "Everyone, please allow me to introduce a distinguished guest from the eastern region of the Empire of Light, Viscount Austen." Warm applause immediately sounded. Viscount Austen looked around and bowed gracefully and calmly in return. Then, the Viscounts of the eastern region picked up a glass of champagne and said in a clear voice, "This time, I have come here on behalf of Marquis Vincent for the peace of Silver Moon City, for the friendship between the eastern region and the half-elf kingdom, and of course, for the glory of Queen Aisha. Let us toast to the everlasting peace and friendship, and to the eternal youth of Her Majesty the Queen. May our friendship last forever. May your Majesty remain young forever." The atmosphere of the banquet gradually warmed up. Queen Aisha led Colin to Austen Viscounts and introduced him with a smile. "Your Excellency Austen, Please allow me to introduce you. This is His Excellency Viscount Angley from the northern frontier. Both of you are Viscounts of the Empire, so you must have a lot in common. Viscount Austen smiled and stretched out his hand to Colin. Of course, I have heard a lot about Viscount Angley. Colin also smiled and shook hands with the other party, saying, "Oh, what kind of reputation have you heard?" "Of course, it is a good reputation. It is said that you once fought together with Marquis Garcia in the Sky Ice Field and defeated an army of 300,000 trolls." "Oh, that is all thanks to Marquis Garcia. I just happened to be there to join in the fun." "You are too modest." Viscount Austen's smile suddenly became a little ambiguous. "In addition, I also heard that you have a good relationship with Miss Vera." "Miss Vera is indeed someone I admire." Colin nodded and admitted. After all, he had proposed to her, so it would be meaningless to deny it again. "I wonder if Miss Vera's injury is serious this time?" "It is indeed a little serious. Although her life is not in danger, she still needs to rest in bed for a long time." "I heard that Miss Vera was injured because of an assassination. I wonder who is so bold?" Viscount Austen's face was full of anger. "It is Prince Tup." "Prince Tup?" Viscount Austen was shocked. "Isn't that Miss Vera's fiancé?" "Then why? Because he found out that I am Vera's first man?" Viscount Austen did not know what to say in the face of Colin's frankness. Before he came, of course, he had heard about what happened in Silvermoon City from the Earl of Avon. He also knew that the cause of everything was actually the body examination that happened in Queen Consort's bedroom. However, like everyone else, Viscount Austen also felt that Prince Tup's sudden killing was too strange. Now that he heard Colin admit to his secret relationship with Vera, the doubts in his heart grew stronger. "Viscount Angley, with all due respect, I actually find it hard to believe that Prince Tup knew about the affair between you and Vera and suddenly killed someone. This reason is too far-fetched." Colin smiled and suddenly lowered his voice. "Then do you want to know the real reason why Tup killed someone?" "What is it?" Viscount Austen leaned forward involuntarily and asked in a low voice. "That is because—" Colin moved closer to Viscount Austen's ear. "Tup was instructed by the Duke of St. Hilda to let Vera die in Half-Elven Palace." How is this possible?" Viscount Austen's eyes widened in disbelief. But looking at Colin's serious expression and Queen Aisha's approving gaze next to him, Viscount Austen calmed down and pondered carefully. Suddenly, he realized with a start that this might really be true. So, the Duke of St. Hilda wanted to get an excuse to enter the Half-Elven Kingdom, yes? Colin's face was full of pain. "I really did not want to see Miss Vera die, so I risked my life to save her." "I see." Viscount Austen felt that the whole thing could be explained. But then he was puzzled again. Why did Colin tell him this? As if he could see the doubts in the Viscount Austen, Colin spoke again. "Your Excellency, I am telling you this because I hope you can understand that I am now going against the will of the Duke of St. Hilda to save Miss Vera. And the Black Cavalry, unfortunately, they were also destroyed in the Shadow Canyon. So, now the Duke of St. Hilda's plan to plot against the Half-Elven Kingdom has basically failed completely. I'm worried." "Are you worried that the Duke of St. Hilda will vent his anger on you?" Viscount Austen felt that he finally understood Colin's plan. Colin nodded repeatedly. After hesitating for a moment, he whispered again, "I don't know if you can help me pass a message to Marquis Vincent?" "Please speak." Colin gritted his teeth as if he had finally made up his mind. "I want to pledge my loyalty to the House of St. Prospero." Chapter 140. Viscount Austen's scrutinizing gaze roamed Colin's body for a long time. However, he quickly put on a sincere smile and said, "Viscount Angeli, you've made the right decision. The Duke of St. Prospero is a generous and benevolent lord, someone worthy of your loyalty." Colin seemed to finally heave a sigh of relief, hurriedly grasping the Viscount's hand and expressing his gratitude. The Viscount Austen looked at Colin, whose attitude had suddenly become incomparably flattering, and could not help but feel disdain. After a few more words, the Viscount Austen dismissed Colin. Arriving at the buffet table, The Viscount Orsten put a few exquisite desserts into his mouth, and then saw a familiar figure pass by him. Prince William. Oh, I'm sorry, it should be Duke Modwin now. William, who had just been conferred the title of Duke Modwin by Queen Aisha, hurriedly bowed to the Viscount Orsten with a smile. The two of them had met a few times before, and could be considered acquaintances. Your Excellency Viscounts, welcome to Silvery Moon City again. Haha, I'm also considered an old guest of Silvery Moon City. It's just that every time I come, there's a huge change here, especially this time. Duke Modwin's face revealed an awkward expression. Silvery Moon City had indeed changed a lot these days. He had also changed from the Prince William to the current Duke Modwin. It's a little big, but don't worry. Our hospitality to our esteemed guests is still as warm as before. Oh? Does this mean that there will be a beautiful half-elf female slave in my room tonight, just like in the past? Of course. The two of them looked at each other and smiled ambiguously. Looks like you're doing well now, the Viscount Orsten said with a smile. It's all right. Duke Modwin's expression was unnatural. The Viscount Orsten swirled the wine glass in his hand and suddenly said coldly, William, we're old friends. Tell me the truth, are you really willing to be a duke? Duke Modwin's heart trembled, and he immediately looked around. Seeing that no one had noticed them, he let out a sigh of relief. Your Excellency Viscounts, how can I not be willing? Her Majesty is still merciful to the House of Medea. The Viscount Orsten chuckled, and said with disdain, What queen? The Miller family is just usurpers. Since when did they have the right to be half-elves? Duke Modwin was even more embarrassed, because Viscount Orsten's words included them as well. After all, to the former half-elf royal family, the Savoy family, the Mortawin family, were also usurpers. Looking at the silent Duke Modwin, the Viscount Orsten already had a plan. He knew that William was also unwilling, but he did not dare to resist the pressure from the Miller family and the northern frontier. Thus, he felt that he should provoke him again. William, Marquis Vincent told me before I came that the House of Medea is the House of St. Prospero's best partner, and the only family that has the right to control the half-elven kingdom. Duke Modwin suddenly raised his head and looked at the Viscount Orsten with bright eyes. He opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. The Viscount Orsten was disappointed. He already knew that William was cowardly and stupid, but the House of Medea was already at this stage, and this guy was still the same. William, tell me, do you want to take back the throne that originally belonged to the House of Medea? At this point, Duke Modwin could no longer avoid the question. He finally nodded and said in a mosquito-like voice, Yes. Very good. The Viscount Orsten smirked. Then, tell me, what happened in Queen Consort's palace? Duke Modwin immediately recounted everything he knew in detail. The Viscount Orsten was disappointed, because what Duke Modwin told him was the version he heard from the Earl of Avon, and it was not as convincing as Colin's version. What kind of person do you think Viscount Angley is? The Viscount Orsten asked again. Is smart, strong, and resourceful. Even Queen Aisha listens to him. Oh? Is that so? Actually, it was Viscount Angley who asked me to give the throne to Aisha. The Viscount Orsten stroked his mustache, and suddenly frowned. So, Viscount Angley now has a lot of control over Silvery Moon City? You could even say that he is the true master of Silvery Moon City. Many half-elf nobles know that Her Majesty may not be able to solve any problems, but as long as Viscount Angley agrees, there will definitely be no obstacles. Is that so? The Viscount Orsten's expression became more serious. Why is Queen Aisha so obedient to him? Doesn't she know that the Black Cavalry has already been annihilated in the Shadow Canyon? Of course she knows. Duke Modwin's words were hesitant. The Viscount Orsten reached out his right hand and pressed it on his shoulder, squeezing it hard, and said in a low voice, William, don't worry. Marquis Vincent's army of 100,000 is about to arrive at Silvery Moon City. We will be your solid backing, so you don't have to be afraid of anything. Hearing about the army of 100,000, Duke Modwin's expression changed slightly. After a while, he seemed to have finally made up his mind, and said in a low voice, "Your Excellency Viscounts, there is actually a remnant of the Black Cavalry that escaped to Silvery Moon City. It is because of this military force that Viscount Angley became the true master of this city." The Viscount Orsten's eyes widened, and he hurriedly asked, "The remnant of the Black Cavalry? How did they get here? How many people are there?" "It is said that they came from the north of the Shadow Mountains. There are a total of 8,000 people." The Viscount Orsten narrowed his eyes, and he was a little confused. He actually knew that a portion of the Black Cavalry had not been sealed in the Shadow Canyon and had successfully escaped. However, he had thought that the remnant of the Black Cavalry would definitely escape back to the northern frontier. He did not expect that they would still come to Silvery Moon City. Moreover, Colin had not mentioned the existence of this army to him. Thinking of this, the Viscount Orsten raised his head and looked in Colin's direction. There, Colin was chatting happily with Queen Aisha, and their attitudes were rather intimate. Pledging loyalty to the East? The Viscount Orsten laughed coldly as he muttered to himself, "But Viscount Angley, your loyalty seems to be reserved." "Your Excellency Viscounts, what did you say?" Duke Modwin asked carefully. "Nothing." The Viscount Orsten retracted his gaze and no longer cared about Colin. Instead, he smiled and said to Duke Modwin, "William, trust me. As long as the Marquis army reaches Silvery Moon City, all the conspiracies and schemes will vanish. And your House of Medea will once again ascend to the throne of the half-elves." Duke Modwin was so excited that his face turned red. He suppressed the ecstasy in his heart and said softly, "Thank you for the grace of the House of St. Prospero. The House of Medea will always remember this." Chapter 141. As the night deepened, the banquet in the palace finally came to an end. After sending off the guests, Queen Aisha turned around and saw Duke Modwin standing in the shadows with a reserved expression. "Your Majesty, I have done as you requested." Queen Aisha smiled. "Very good. Charlie, William, you are my son, so Charlie is naturally my grandson. But this grandson is too naughty, so I have to help you discipline him. Charlie will be staying at my place for the next few days, so you don't have to worry." It was strange for Queen Aisha to call William, who was older than her, son, but it was the truth. Duke Modwin's face was bitter, but he did not dare to go against Queen Aisha's will. He could only nod and bow before leaving. "I didn't expect you to become a grandmother," Colin walked over and teased. Queen Aisha glanced at Colin flirtatiously and said, "Are you despising me for being old? Why would I? I even suspect that the elven bloodline in you is too thick, and you might become a long-lived species." Queen Aisha chuckled and shook her head. "Half-elves can't become long-lived species." Then she stopped smiling and asked worriedly, "Is it really appropriate for you to let William do this? He's actually not very smart." "It's because he's not very smart that I chose him." Colin chuckled. "An honest man's lie is like a fish bone in a bowl of rice. It's hard to detect, but it can easily pierce your throat." Queen Aisha thought about it for a while before nodding in agreement. "Yes, it does make sense. Then what should we do next?" "Next, of course, is to open the city gates and welcome Marquis Vincent into Silvery Moon City." 3 days later, Viscount Austen left Silvery Moon City and came to Red Maple Manor. At this time, Red Maple Manor had been requisitioned by the Eastern Army and completely turned into a huge military camp. Viscount Austen walked all the way into the manor and saw Marquis Vincent enjoying his dinner in the dining room. "Viscount Austen, you must be tired. Eat first." The two of them quickly and elegantly finished their dinner. Then Marquis Vincent asked, "How was the trip to Silvery Moon City?" "On the surface, everything went well. Queen Aisha has agreed to 2 of your conditions, and even Viscount Angley has expressed his loyalty to the eastern border." "Oh?" Vincent raised his eyebrows. Why did Viscount Angley betray the northern frontier? According to him, it was because he found out that the Duke of St. Hilda wanted to sacrifice Vera as an excuse to invade the half-elf kingdom. And Vera is Viscount Angley's beloved, so he resented the Duke of St. Hilda. "Just because of a woman?" Vincent asked suspiciously. Besides, this time, Vera did not die in the half-elven palace because of Viscount Angley. Obviously, he was worried that this would anger the Duke of St. Hilda and even blame him for the failure of the northern frontier in the half-elf kingdom. Well, that makes sense. Marquis Vincent pondered, then asked, "Then why did you say that on the surface, everything went well?" "Because I found out that Viscount Angley is still hiding something from us." "What is he hiding?" "He hid the fact that there are still 8,000 black cavalry soldiers in Silvermoon City." "Black cavalry?" Marquis Vincent suddenly sat up straight, his face solemn. Although they had just wiped out the main force of the Black Cavalry, Marquis Vincent was still traumatized by this terrifying army of the North. In the Shadow Canyon, the Sky Horse Legion had to pay twice the price to win the ambush, even though they had the terrain advantage. Marquis Vincent did not feel the slightest bit of joy at this result. Instead, he felt deeply humiliated and afraid. Therefore, he had chosen to continue leading the army to the north. He wanted to achieve a great victory in Silvermoon City to wash away the humiliation of the Shadow Canyon. But he did not expect that there was still a troop of black cavalry soldiers in Silvermoon City. "Who told you this news?" "William Madawan." "You believe him?" "I know William. He wouldn't lie to me." "Also, I asked a few other half-elf nobles who are on good terms with the East. They all said that they saw a troop of black cavalry enter Silvermoon City." "What about Queen Aisha? What's her attitude?" "I'm afraid that she's a puppet supported by the northern frontier. Her words can't be trusted." Marquis Vincent nodded and frowned. "So they're just pretending that they want us to submit to them. They want to numb us?" "That should be the case." "Ha, how arrogant." Marquis Vincent's face was a little sinister. "How many troops are left in Silvermoon City?" "William told me that the Silver Moon Guards of the Half-Elven Kingdom had just experienced a coup and suffered heavy losses. Although they had urgently replenished a batch of new soldiers and restored the number of soldiers to 30,000, the Silver Moon Guards of the Half-Elven Kingdom had suffered heavy losses. Although they have replenished their forces, there are at most 20,000 veterans who can fight. Other than that, there's only the 8,000 black cavalry soldiers left. The Silver Moon Guard is nothing to be afraid of." Marquis Vincent waved his hand and said disdainfully. But then his tone became serious. "The key is the 8,000 black cavalry soldiers." Viscount Austin nodded in agreement. "Yes, William also told me that the 8,000 black cavalry soldiers are not in Silvermoon City." "Then where are they?" Viscount Austin walked to the military map hanging on the wall and pointed at a location. "They're hiding on this small hill in the southwest of Silvermoon City." Marquis Vincent squinted his eyes and looked for a while. Suddenly, he laughed. "It seems that the northern frontier is planning to lure us into Silvermoon City and then control us when we're unprepared. Then, the black cavalry soldiers hiding outside the city will suddenly attack from behind and crush our army." "The Marquis is wise." Marquis Vincent snorted and said disdainfully, "Such a clumsy plan. Hee, it seems that Viscount Angley, who is said to be under the tutelage of Marquis Garcia, is only so. Of course, Viscount Austin said flatteringly. "Moreover, even Marquis Garcia was defeated by the Marquis. What can a Viscount Angley do?" Marquis Vincent raised his chin and ordered loudly with a smug look on his face, "I'll give you 40,000 men. Tomorrow, set off for Silvermoon City. When you arrive, surround the city. No matter how the half-elves and the northern frontier lure you, don't enter the city. Seal off Silvermoon City and don't let a single soldier out. I'll personally lead 60,000 men to kill the remaining black cavalry soldiers hiding outside the city. This time, I want the black cavalry to completely disappear from this continent." "Yes, Margaret." Chapter 142. The Dark Thorn Mountain was like a giant beast crouching in the southwest of Silvery Moon City. The terrain here wasn't high, and the thorns on the mountain made it difficult to travel. Therefore, very few half-elf hunters would come here to hunt. This also caused the area around Bramble Mountain to be deserted and become a paradise for wild animals. But today, the tranquility of Thorn Mountain was suddenly broken. Thud, thud, thud. The sound of horse hooves startled countless birds and beasts in the forest. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. A few sharp arrows flew past. They didn't hit anyone, but a passing elk was caught in the crossfire. The two sides in this chase were black and white. The black side was naturally the black cavalry, while the white side was the Sky Horse Army of the East. The black side only had one person, while the white side had slightly more people, about 30 riders. From the style of their uniforms, they should be sentries. This was actually a little strange. Because of the battle between the two armies, the Sentinel cavalry would normally not go all out to pursue and attack. First of all, the sentries' main task was to bring back information, not the enemy's head. Moreover, if they gave chase too deep, they could easily be led into the enemy's encirclement. That would be suicide. However, the Sky Horse Legion's Sentinel Cavalry squad was chasing after the Black Guard's Sentinel Cavalry. They were so desperate because they found out that this was a big fish, Colin Viscount Angley. The sentries of the Sky Horse Army didn't understand why the respected Northern Frontier Viscounts would personally come out to investigate. But after seeing Colin's face, which was exactly the same as the one in the portrait, they threw away all their worries and focused on getting first place in this battle. The mountain path was difficult, and there were thorns in the way. Both sides didn't push their speed to the limit. But after a while, they were almost halfway up the mountain. There was some foam at the horse's mouth, and it looked like it could collapse at any time. Colin reached out to touch the horse's neck, and found that the warhorse under him was sweating profusely. It was obviously going to die soon. Half-elf warhorses really couldn't compare to the good horses of the northern frontier. Colin secretly ridiculed. At this moment, the warhorse under him suddenly staggered and rolled on the ground. The crisp sound of bones breaking was exceptionally ear-piercing. Colin, who was on the horse, was also thrown out, but he had already adjusted his posture in the air. When he landed, he rolled forward to reduce the impact, and then jumped up vigorously. "Quick, catch him!" The pursuing sentries of the eastern region immediately rushed forward as if they had been injected with chicken blood. Colin calmly pulled out the blade of judgment from his waist and faced the dozen or so fast horses that were charging at him. He assumed a fighting posture. Boom! There was a loud bang. Judgment blade burned with red flames, and a blinding golden holy light burst out. What followed was blood splattering everywhere, as if it was raining blood. As for the cavalryman who was charging towards Colin, he was split in half along with his horse. The blood and golden light gradually dissipated, and Colin's figure gradually appeared. At this time, he was already covered in blood, looking like a devil who had crawled out of hell. Colin licked the blood on his face and was about to taunt the other side when he saw another cavalryman charging at him from the side. Boom! The blade of judgment turned into a red light and split the cavalryman in half. However, there was still a third, a fourth, a fifth. These sentries of the eastern region seemed to have gone crazy. They rushed towards Colin one after another, like moths to a flame. After slaughtering the 15th cavalryman, Colin saw the 16th cavalryman rushing towards him. Finally, his face changed. The holy light emitted from the other side showed that the 16th cavalryman was a knight. At this time, Colin's arms were already numb from the previous crazy impact. He no longer dared to take the hit head-on. He quickly rolled on the ground to avoid the impact of the other side. At this time, he finally understood why a high-grade knight couldn't escape death when surrounded by an army. Just when Colin was thinking about whether to transform or not, the sound of hooves was heard again from the forest. Soon, more than a dozen black-armored cavalrymen appeared on the battlefield. "Protect Viscount Angley." Seeing this, the sentries of the eastern region knew that they would not be able to catch this big fish today. They immediately turned their horses around and fled down the mountain. "Sir Viscounts, are you okay?" "I'm fine." Colin put away his sword and shouted to the cavalrymen who tried to chase, "Don't chase, let them escape." "Yes, sir, a large number of Eastern Region troops have gathered at the foot of the mountain. We have been surrounded. Do you want to break out immediately?" Colin touched the blood on his face and shook his head. "No, it's not time yet." Colin looked at the other side's young but determined face and suddenly asked, "What's wrong? Are you afraid?" The sentries of the Black Cavalry decisively shook their head. "Sir, the Black Cavalry is never afraid of battle." Colin raised his eyebrows. Even if it's a fight to the death, you're not afraid? Not afraid. The young sentries of the Black Cavalry straightened their chest with a natural look. Colin stared at the other side's eyes and then looked around. He found that there was no trace of fear in the eyes of the Black Cavalry soldiers. His mood suddenly became very complicated. After hesitating for a moment, he whispered, "You will really die in this battle." Bang! The sentries of the Black Cavalry heavily patted their chest armor and shouted, "As long as we can take revenge for the Shadow Canyon, we will die without regrets. Die without regrets. Die without regrets." Looking at the impassioned faces in front of him, Colin suddenly felt something surging in his heart. Perhaps this was the real reason why the Black Guards were undefeatable and invincible. Colin took a deep breath and solemnly clasped his right hand on his chest. He saluted the crowd and loudly said, "I promise you that I will fight with you until the last moment. Moreover, this army of the eastern region will be destroyed in the Half-Elven Kingdom, at the foot of Thorn Mountain, in the Sky Horse Legion's camp." A knight quickly walked into the temporary command post and hurriedly saluted. "Sir Marquis, I have found Viscount Angley's traces in Thorn Mountain." Marquis Vincent's eyes lit up. "Are you sure?" "Yes, I have fought with him before." "Good." Marquis Vincent excitedly slammed the table, stood up, and walked back and forth in the tent. Combining the information of the other sentries, there was indeed an army of more than 8,000 hidden in Thorn Mountain. Now that he had found traces of Colin, Marquis Vincent could basically confirm that the remnants of the Black Cavalry were hiding in this mountain. This Colin Angley is really stupid. He actually hid his army in such a dangerous place. Moreover, he lacks the courage to make a decision. If he had decisively led his army out earlier, perhaps some of them could have escaped. Unfortunately, the net is already set. He can't escape even if he wants to. After a while, he stood still and ordered, "Pass down my orders. Defend the foot of the mountain. Don't let any of the Black Cavalry escape. Also, have the soldiers cut down trees and collect weeds. Tomorrow morning I will burn down this mountain. Yes." Chapter 143. When the sun bloomed again, thick smoke suddenly rose from the Thorn Mountain. It was the end of autumn and the beginning of winter. The weather was dry and the dead leaves and branches on the mountain made the fire unstoppable. Looking down from the sky, at this time, at the foot of the Thorn Mountain, a fire dragon had risen and was spreading at an extremely fast speed. People who had experienced a fire would understand that the fire was indeed terrible, but what was more terrible was the thick smoke caused by the fire. It was the real culprit with the most destructive power. As the fire and smoke continued to rush to the top of the mountain, screams, neighs, and shouts finally made the Thorn Mountain boil. The army on the mountain could no longer continue to hide. Without the command of the officer, they immediately rushed down the mountain. At the foot of the mountain, the Sky Horse Legion had been waiting for a long time. But when the first soldier rushed out of the fire, the soldiers of the eastern region were stunned to find that the other side was not wearing the military uniform of the Black Cavalry. In fact, he was not even human. He was a half-elf. As more and more half-elf soldiers rushed down the mountain, the soldiers of the eastern region were confused. Wasn't it said that the Black Cavalry was hiding on the Thorn Mountain? How come all the soldiers rushing out were half-elves? However, although the soldiers of the eastern region were puzzled, their hands did not slow down. They immediately shot arrows at the half-elves who were rolling on the ground. The transmission of information on the battlefield was always a bit delayed. At this time, the soldiers of the eastern region did not realize the seriousness of the problem. Most of them were still thinking maybe the Black Cavalry rushed out from another direction. However, what they did not know was that almost all the soldiers rushing down from the Thorn Mountain were half-elves. The word "almost" was because there was only one group of Black Cavalry rushing out from the foot of the mountain in the southwest. There were not many of them, only 100. But this already made the soldiers of the eastern region very excited. Not to mention, there was a big fish in this group of Black Cavalry. That is Colin Angley. Quick, don't let him escape. Colin led a group of Black Cavalry. At this time, like a tiger rushing down the mountain, with an indomitable momentum, crashed into the Sky Horse Legion's position. Bang! Blood splattered everywhere, and severed limbs flew everywhere. This confrontation had just begun, but it had already entered the most desperate stage. However, the Black Cavalry were too few in number. Although they had broken through the Sky Horse Legion's defensive line, most of them were trapped in the enemy's position. Only a few cavalrymen followed behind Colin and stubbornly rushed out. "Quick, inform the cavalry to pursue." The Sky Horse Legion also had cavalry. Although there weren't many of them and they weren't as famous as the Black Cavalry, they were more than enough to surround and intercept the Black Cavalry's scattered soldiers. Sharp whistles kept echoing in the forest, and a team of Eastern cavalry began to gather at the periphery of the Thorn Mountain. Colin and his men didn't dare to look back. They kept drilling into the lush forest, trying to create trouble for their pursuers. However, there were still too many pursuers. Arrows flew past them one after another, occasionally taking the life of one of their companions. He didn't know how far he had run. When Colin looked back, he found that there were only 3 Black Cavalry soldiers left behind him. However, the pursuers behind them were like corpses, and they couldn't get rid of them. There were even sharp whistles coming from the front, which should be the Eastern Cavalry's encirclement. Facing this desperate situation, the last 3 Black Cavalry soldiers exchanged glances with each other and suddenly stopped their horses. Colin heard the horses neigh and quickly looked back. He saw that the 3 men had already slowly turned their horses around and assumed a charging posture. "What are you doing?" "Sir Viscounts, we are helping you block the pursuers." Nay, Colin also immediately stopped his horse and turned back to the 3 men. "Lord Viscount, you have to run." Colin shook his head. "I promised you that I would fight with you until the last moment." "Sir Viscounts, don't say any more. I just hope that you don't hate me for bringing you to this place of death." "No, Sir Viscounts, we are willing to do this. As long as your plan can be carried out smoothly, as long as the Shadow Canyon can be avenged, any price we pay is worth it." Colin didn't know what to say at this time. Taking a deep breath, he quickly pulled out his sword and roared, "Don't worry, they will all die." With Colin's roar, the 4 men and 4 horses rushed toward the hundreds of Eastern Cavalry soldiers. Heroes are respectable, but heroes are not invincible. Soon, of the 4 heroes, only Colin was left standing alone in the encirclement of hundreds of Eastern Cavalry soldiers. "Viscount Angley, put down your weapon, kneel down and surrender. According to the aristocratic law, we will give you preferential treatment. You can also write a letter back to the Angeli family and ask them to bring enough gold coins to redeem you." The leader of the Eastern Cavalry shouted at Colin with an unconcealable pride on his face. But soon his face changed. Because Colin didn't pay attention to his persuasion. Instead, he indifferently pulled out the arrows that were stuck in his body one by one. The Eastern Cavalry frowned. The other side's irreverent attitude obviously made him unhappy. "Viscount Angley, don't make a futile struggle. You have lost this battle." "We lost." Colin finally spoke. There was no fear or loss in his voice. "So, you think you have won?" The Eastern Cavalry was speechless for a while, thinking that the young Viscounts in front of him didn't have a brain damaged by smoke. How could he ask such a stupid question? Colin had pulled out all the arrows in his body. He then pointed to the 3 Black Cavalry soldiers' bodies at his feet and asked, "With these brave warriors, how can you win?" The Eastern Cavalry snorted and strode forward, ready to wake up the northern frontier Viscounts who was still intoxicated in his own fantasy and couldn't recognize reality. But as he approached Colin step by step, he found that the other side's momentum was rising rapidly. It even gave him the illusion that the other side's body was rapidly growing taller. However, this was not an illusion. Colin was really growing taller. Gotcha! The original armor could no longer accommodate the expanding body, and it was instantly torn apart. The Eastern Cavalry was stunned to see the sudden appearance of the little giant in front of him. For a moment he even forgot to escape. "Did you win?" Colin opened his bloody mouth and roared as he smashed his fist down. Bang! In an instant, the Eastern Cavalry was completely smashed into a meat paste. "Devil! Devil!" The rest of the Eastern cavalry was suddenly scared. It wasn't until Colin flapped his huge bat wings and arrived in front of them that they realized that they had to run away. However, how could those running on the ground be faster than those flying in the sky? After the transformation, Colin was like a god of death, constantly harvesting one fresh life after another. When the other Eastern cavalry arrived, they could only stare at the blood and broken corpses on the ground. What just happened here? A massacre? Chapter 144. Missing? What do you mean missing? Didn't you just report that you found his tracks? Marquis Vincent shouted at the messenger in front of him in the temporary command center of the Sky Horse Legion. But no, I can't find him. Trash. Keep looking for him. If he's alive, I want to see him. If he's dead, I want to see his corpse. Colin Angeli is a living person. Do you think he can fly away? After the messenger left in a hurry, Marquis Vincent picked up the cup and took a sip, but it was scalded. He was so angry that he smashed the cup on the ground and shouted, "Who prepared the tea? Do you want to burn me to death?" A squire next to him trembled and knelt on the ground, begging for mercy. Chi a sword flashed and the poor guy's head was chopped off by Marquis Vincent. Looking at the blood on the ground, Marquis Vincent finally vented some of his anger. Putting away his sword, Marquis Vincent returned to the military map and remained silent. The attendants and other officers in the command center didn't dare to make a sound, fearing that the Marquis would take his anger out on them. Before the battle, Marquis Vincent could be said to have a card up his sleeve. But when more and more half-elves rushed down from the Thorn Mountain instead of the Black Cavalry, Marquis Vincent's temper became irritable. Everyone began to have the same thought: are we being played by the northern frontier? After an unknown amount of time, the battle cries outside gradually subsided. An Eastern knight strode into the command post and reported, "Sir Marquis, the battle is over. This time, our army has won a great victory. We killed more than 2,000 half-elves and captured more than 4,000 half-elves. In addition, more than 3,000 burnt corpses were found on Bramble Mountain. They were all half-elves?" Yes, they were all half-elves. As for the humans, there were only about 100 of them. Judging from their equipment, they should be Black Cavalry. When they tried to break out of the encirclement, they were all killed by our army. What about Colin Angeli? We haven't found him yet. Marquis Vincent didn't say anything. The tent fell into an unbearable silence once more. It was reasonable to say that the Eastern region had indeed won the battle at Thorn Mountain, but now, none of them dared to show the joy of a victor. After a long while, Marquis Vincent finally spoke again. His tone was no longer as smug as before the battle. "So, we've been deceived? It's not the Black Cavalry hiding in Thorn Mountain, but the half-elven army? Where is the real Black Cavalry now?" Marquis Vincent muttered to himself. An officer whispered, "Sir, could the Black Cavalry be hiding in Silver Moon City?" Silver Moon City? Marquis Vincent's face suddenly changed as he shouted anxiously, Quickly inform Austin and have him lead the army back." "Lord Viscount Austin, Her Majesty the Queen has invited you and Marquis Vincent into the city to rest. Isn't Her Majesty the Queen going to personally welcome Marquis Vincent? Isn't that a little rude?" The half-elven messenger paused for a moment before he smiled and explained, "Lord Viscounts, Her Majesty the Queen is not feeling well today, so she can't go out. I hope you can understand." "Viscounts," Austin sneered, "then let Viscount Angley come out to welcome us." "We don't have the right to ask Viscount Angley to do anything, Go back and tell Viscount Angley that I will wait for him outside the city until noon. If he doesn't bring Vera out to welcome Marquis Vincent after noon, then don't blame me for breaking into Silvermoon City and capturing him and Vera." The half-elven messenger's eyes widened. He didn't expect Viscount Austin to suddenly turn hostile. "Lord Viscounts, why are you doing this?" Viscount Austin waved his hand impatiently and scolded, "All right, I'm too lazy to talk to you. Go back to the city immediately and pass my words to Viscount Angley. Also, tell Her Majesty the Queen that it's best to see the current situation clearly. Don't let this beautiful garden become a ruin." The half-elven messenger looked at Viscount Austen's frosty face and broke out in cold sweat. He hurriedly bid farewell and left. Looking at the other party's wretched back, Viscount Austen snorted in disdain and ordered, "Pass down my orders, prepare to attack the city." Once the order was given, the 40,000 soldiers of the Sky Horse Army immediately sprang into action. Very quickly, they surrounded Silvermoon City so tightly that not even a drop of water could escape. Generally speaking, sieges focused on encircling 3 sides and blocking 1. However, Viscount Austen surrounded Silvermoon City on all sides. This was undoubtedly a form of contempt. In the eyes of the eastern region, the half-elven army wouldn't be much of a threat even if they were forced into a dead end. The only thing that could pose a threat to the Sky Horse Legion was the remnants of the Black Cavalry Army. Viscount Austen turned his head and looked towards the southwest of Silvermoon City. As expected, there was already thick smoke rising from there. Viscount Austen smiled proudly and ordered his retainer, "Prepare lunch for me. The fall of a garden city is the best meal." Time passed slowly, but there was no more news from Silvermoon City. It was as if Queen Aisha and Viscount Angley had already made up their minds to defend the city until the end. When the sun hung high in the sky, Viscount Austen sat down at the small dining table that had been set up on the battlefield. He elegantly tied a napkin in front of his chest, picked up a knife and fork, and cut a piece of beef. "Attack the city." Woo! With a loud bugle call, the Eastern Region soldiers began their attack on Silvermoon City. They carried the siege logs and climbed up the wooden ladders. Their movements were vigorous as they rushed towards the 4 city gates. But what puzzled them was that the expected rain of arrows never came. Many of the Eastern Region soldiers began to laugh inwardly. Were the half-elves scared out of their wits? At this moment, the 4 city gates of Silvermoon City suddenly opened at the same time. The Eastern Region soldiers slowed down in confusion. Could it be that the half-elves finally understood and were ready to surrender? Viscount Austen also saw the open gates of Silvermoon City from afar. The beef that had just been delivered to his mouth stopped. "It's too late to surrender now. Order the entire army to continue the attack." Viscount Austen had made up his mind to teach the half-elves a lesson. Moreover, he needed a meal to accompany his lunch. After all, he had already begun to act cool. Naturally, he had to act cool until the end. Even if the opponent did not want to cooperate, Viscount Austen would not agree. But then, the earth suddenly began to tremble. The rumbling of horse hooves suddenly covered the sound of the Sky Horse Legion's bugle call, becoming the only sound on the battlefield. "Sir Viscounts, I think the half-elves surrender team is coming out," the retainer said with a smile. But Viscount Austen did not smile. His face instantly became incomparably pale. How could a surrender team have this kind of power? This was clearly a cavalry army. Sure enough, in the next second, he saw a black mass of cavalry rushing out of the city gates like a sharp arrow. With the momentum of the autumn wind sweeping away the fallen leaves, the Eastern Region's army that was about to attack Silvermoon City was instantly defeated. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.